Number 10. Getting his memories back. I mean, this is one of the worst and best things to happen to Bucky when you think about it. He pursued his memories for a long time after losing them to brainwashing, but at the same time, they gave him a pretty huge amount of guilt, as he also remembered everything he had done, the person he used to be, but also the person he was shaped into becoming, against his will. It would often mean that we'd get a very different version of Bucky when he returned as the Winter Soldier after he remembered who he was, a much moodier version than the bright-eyed youngster who had been Captain America's confidant, pal, and sidekick. It would also mean that Bucky would often feel he wasn't worthy of certain tasks, titles, or even friendships, and that it would be hard for him to move forward and see himself as the hero that he could be. The hero he always had been before he was manipulated into being a villain that really he was not. Number 9. Died in the snap. Oh, I didn't snap. Can't snap today. This is terrible. Don't give me the gauntlet today. Admittedly not that bad, as all the heroes who died were returned to us once more when the Avengers finally managed to discover the secrets of time travel, used it to collect the stones, and managed to reassemble a version of the gauntlet, and undid what Thanos had done. But still, dying is never really a good time, I imagine, and all the death we experienced in Infinity War was still very tragic. Also, for a while, we didn't really know if it would end up being reversed. I mean, we hoped, we guessed, we assumed, but it was still unknown as to if it would end up being possible for our heroes to bring everyone back. So of course, Bucky is now back, and after Steve traveled back in time to settle down with Peggy, live his life out with her, and basically ended up retiring, the Winter Soldier returns to the screen to team up on Disney Plus with his partner and Cap's friend besides, Falcon, aka Sam Wilson. Alright friends, before we move on to this next point, if you are enjoying this video and you want to see more videos like it and hear more cool stuff about Winter Soldier, be sure to show us you like it by giving it a thumbs up. Hey! Number 8. The death of his parents. Not only does Bucky have a tragic life following the events of World War II, but even before then, it was pretty sad. When he was only 10 years old, he found himself an orphan. His mother had died earlier on when he was younger, making Bucky not just an older brother to his sister, but also kind of a stand-in parent for her as well, with his father working most of the time to provide for the family. Later on, Bucky would lose his father too, who died in a tragic accident that took place during his basic training with the military. Bucky and his sister would ultimately be split up, and Bucky would end up convincing Camp Lehigh, where his dad had trained, to take him in as a ward of the state, with him going on to become the camp mascot, inspiring and later on even assisting the troops. Number 7. A man out of time. Like Captain America, Bucky is also considered a man out of time. While he was born in 1925, he now lives in the present day, meaning that many of his friends from his days when he was a camp mascot during the war times and pal of Captain America, or if we're talking the MCU serving in the war, are now all dead. Not only that, but like Steve, he's had to adapt to the progress of the modern day, adapting to living in a very different world from the one that he was born into. Granted, this may have been easier for Bucky considering he was at least around, at least periodically, throughout the passing years, and as such has at least seen some of the changes as they've happened. But of course, this timelessness could also be hard for him to adjust to, especially considering how much of the time in his life he spent being controlled by others and not really experiencing the world from his own point of view, but being manipulated by others to see it how they wanted him to see it.
Number 6. Lost a fight to Ant-Man. It was a great audition, but it will never happen again. Those are the words Sam Wilson says to Scott Lang when they meet for the second time in Captain America: Civil War. The first time they met was when Scott was sent to the New Avengers facility by Hank Pym in the first Ant-Man movie. See, Scott wasn't aware that he was going there, but once he arrived, Sam Wilson was sure aware of his presence. Falcon demanded to know why he was there, and when Ant-Man said he needed to borrow the signal decoy, Falcon just wasn't buying it, and they went at it. And at one point, Sam pulled out guns and shot at Scott. That's how much he thought he was a spy, but Scott won, not by using the higher ground, but by using the smaller one. He shrunk down and got into Sam's jetpack, pulled some plugs, and then Sam fell down to the ground, letting the new Avenger finish his mission. So Sam called into Natasha and made it very clear that Steve never hears about this in the future. Don't worry, Sam, I think all is forgiven at this point. Number 5. Arrested. Captain America: Civil War is a staple in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The story that begins to unfold in that movie is still being worked out today in the MCU with Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So when Sam Wilson tried to help Steve protect Bucky from Black Panther, it ends with them being arrested. And on top of being arrested, Cap got his shield taken away and Sam's wings were also taken. So when Zemo sneaks into the compound disguised as a psychologist, the power goes out and Sam is left to face off against the Winter Soldier without any of his gear. and it doesn't last too long. In fact, none of the Avengers last too long, but Steve was thankfully able to stop him. The whole Sokovia Accords thing made it very hard for them to suit up and start blowing up the whole building. Now, without his wings, the Falcon couldn't fly and would have to catch a super soldier on feet, regular human feet. Odds are you're not going to succeed. He's actually quite great at being a sleeper agent. And he didn't succeed. Nice try, Sam. Your heart's in the right place at least, so that's cool. Number 4, Marvel Zombies. In Marvel Zombies 3, issue 2, we see Falcon and, well, he's not around for too long, thankfully. I know this sounds weird, but hear me out. So Earth 2149 is a universe I hope to never see with my own eyes because it's terrifying. All of our heroes are zombified, they're zombies. It's gory, it's hopeless, and we're actually gonna get some sort of zombie episode for Disney's What If series coming to Disney+. So maybe we'll see this horrible version of Falcon, but hopefully not, because ooh. So Sam received a call from Nick Fury about this terrible world issue, and at this point heroes and villains have put their past aside because now it's go time. He doesn't last long in human form because when Beast and Reed Richards find a large stash of meat in Latveria, a zombie Falcon swoops in with a horde of other zombies. So Zombie Falcon returned to New York, and then when Machine Man and Jocasta arrived, all these flying zombie supers attacked, Falcon of course being one of them. Now alongside him we also have Beak, Angel, and Vulture. Falcon got a hold of Jocasta's leg, robot leg I might add, and she got payback by blasting his head off with her laser eyes. So not Sam's finest hour, that's for sure. Number 3, Chased War Machine. One of the biggest holy shit moments from Captain America Civil War was when Rhodey went down at the end of the airport battle. This was a moment where the audience wasn't actually sure if he had survived or not, and to this day he's still working out his paralysis. So what happened again? Well, while Ant-Man, well rather Giant Man, distracted the rest of the gang, Captain America and Bucky Barnes had made it to the Quinjet while War Machine and Iron Man were flying behind them trying to get them to stop. So Falcon flew in to help Cap and Buck by launching missiles to distract War Machine, and when Vision shot a laser beam out of the Mind Stone, Falcon quickly reacted by tucking in his wings and free falling out of the way. But that laser had to go somewhere and it went right through Rhodey's arc reactor. So Sam and Tony flew down as fast as they could to try and catch him, but it was no hope as Rhodey slammed into the ground. Falcon begins to apologize to Tony, but Tony doesn't say a word. He instead hits Sam with a repulsor shot. And the next we see of Sam is when he's locked up with the rest of the Avengers who chose the wrong side on the raft. Sad times. Number 2, he quit being Captain America. So back in 2015, Captain America was Sam Wilson. It was a good time, mostly. See, Steve had given him the shield, and then in the second issue of Captain America Sam Wilson, Sam got into it with shield over some leaked information that had shield creating its own version of the Cosmic Cube. So Sam wasn't on board with this, so he quit working for the government, and he pulled back to just instead being a friendly neighborhood Captain America. Then shield went ahead and made this new Cosmic Cube, Kobik, which actually made Steve Rogers young again, and his superpowers were topped off as well. So they both were working as Captain America. Now we have 2. 2 is better than 1. Isn't this glorious? This is so good. Which was great for a while, but come issue 21, the world had viewed Sam in a negative way, so he quit. He was like, yeah, f you guys, I'm out of here. He quit until the Secret Empire storyline concluded, you know, with the real Steve Rogers coming back from the cube after he defeated his evil self, all that jazz. But even afterwards, he returned the shield yet again to let Steve inspire the world himself, which is super similar to what I think is currently happening in the MCU with Falcon and the Winter Soldier, because at the end of episode 1, we meet Number 1, the replacement. At the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier episode 1, right before the credits, we see a pretty shocking announcement. We see the government announce a new symbol of hope, a new Captain America. And there he is, wearing the same suit, rocking the same shield, not Falcon. But instead a new guy, this guy named US Agent. Wyatt Russell is playing this character in the MCU. His name is John Walker, and the character first came into comics with Captain America issue 323. He actually started off opposed to Captain America. He was one of those guys who like stage fights, made himself look better, and then he took on the alias Super Patriot, and then finally he went to the new Captain America. This guy isn't the most gentle in the comics, so it may seem like a good choice for the government and how the current state of the world post-blip is. It might get quite ugly. Kicking off the list at number 10, we have the Power Broker. John Walker looked up to his older brother Michael quite a bit, especially after he sacrificed his life serving during the Vietnam War. So John decided to follow in his brother's footsteps, and he went into the military service as well. But that still wasn't enough. John felt like he still wasn't the hero that he needed to be. He kept comparing himself to Michael, and what exactly is a hero without a few super abilities on the side? Am I right? So he paid a visit to the Power Broker. The Power Broker is being teased throughout Falcon and Winter Soldier right now, but what do they do? Who are they? Well, they trade their knowledge of technology for high-paying customers who want to undergo this risky process to basically become a superhero. It's like a gamble to get some powers. Half the time, the clients wouldn't even survive. See, it's not that easy to become a superhero. But it worked for John Walker. Unfortunately, it enhanced his strength a hefty amount. So now we have the motivation, we have the superpowers. So what's the next step? And before we continue on with this list, guys, if you want to go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, that would be great. You guys are super helpful. Thank you so much for your support. Now let's fly right back into this list. Number 9, he became Super Patriot. Before becoming Captain America, John Walker tried the hero gig, just in another fashion. First, he was the Super Patriot. He made his spectacular first appearance in Captain America 323, and John Walker was standing up for America and its true ideals. Nice. He even chose July 4th to make his grand entrance. What a patriot. What a super patriot. So Cap walks by as this is happening when he's making his big debut, and he sees a big poster with his face on it with a big red X through the center. It's kind of like America's Got Talent. And then on the other side, we see the super patriot with a big yes on his side. Okay, that's odd. So now he's starting to publicly shame Captain America in front of his supporters. He's trying to win over the crowd. And if a cool America monologue wasn't enough to do it, he had his own buck, the Bold Urban Commandos. There were 3 of them, and they staged attacks to make John Walker look better. But you could only look so good until number 8. Fought Captain America. So where John and his 3 bold urban commandos staged another attack, Captain America arrived to save the day. And then readers get treated to a star-spangled battle. And John puts up a pretty good fight as well. He can actually go toe-to-toe with Captain America. Thanks, Power Broker. It worked. They end up battling it out for 27 minutes straight. 27 minutes. That's like a full TV episode of just getting punched in the face. That's terrible. But Super Patriot was never able to really land a blow on Cap, and Cap was never able to keep Super Patriot down. So they're just standing there out of breath for 27 minutes like, now what? So Super Patriot leaves before doing the worst thing ever in all of this. He calls Steve a loser, and then he runs away. Number 7, no rules. Captain America 332, the villain Warhead drops in via parachute with a message. Make war some more. Signed, Warhead. You know, in case we confused him with somebody else falling from the skies. He set up a table on top of the Washington Monument, and then he pulled out a nuclear device. So it's not looking like a good situation at all. Perfect time for a hero like Super Patriot. Yeah, he came in and used his powers and saved the day, proving that he can indeed be worthy of the hero life. Well, he tried to, but it didn't go as well as he planned. He climbed up the side, up to Warhead and his well-balanced table, and then he started hucking throwing stars at him at first. He hit him in the face a couple times. And then when that didn't work and he was close enough, he just grabbed the table and threw it into a diving board of doom and just hucked this guy right off into the skies. And he did not survive the fall at all. I mean, you could have handled this in literally any other way. You have superpowers. Come on, use your head.
Number 6, from the Torch to Wonderman. The first Human Torch was not actually Johnny Storm, but was an android created by Professor Phineas Horton himself. Ultron, wanting to make his own such creation, kidnapped the professor and forced him to build an android being for Ultron's own purposes, which we talked about a little bit earlier. The professor, of course, modeled the synthezoid after his own creation, but a little too closely for Ultron's liking, as I said, bestowing the Human Torch's memories as well to the creation we'd later come to know as Vision. Brought to life, this being attacked Ultron, who had killed the professor as punishment for his betrayal. Unfortunately, Torch Vision, this version of Vision, was no match for Ultron, and in the end he actually ended up being reprogrammed by Ultron to follow his orders and was given the brain patterns of Wonderman. Nothing against Wonderman, by the way, but sharing brain patterns with that hero would cause lots of weirdness for Vision and for Scarlet Witch as well later on down the line. I feel like if you get to pick who you want to share brain patterns with, Wonder Man's not at the top of the list. Also, it's really weird that like Wonder Man's brain patterns were just lying around Hank Pym's lab in like a little recorder device. It's like, why did you have those, Hank Pym? What's going on? Number 5, no one to help. This point has some more specific spoilers for the latest episode of WandaVision, episode 6. So if you haven't gotten there yet, you maybe want to skip this one if you want to avoid spoilers, or if you haven't seen it but you're like, I'm living through the spoilers, man, which is fine. In the latest episode of WandaVision, it's Halloween in Westview as we proceed along our sitcom timeline into the world of basically kind of a Malcolm in the Middle inspired era, which aired actually in the 2000s, despite this episode having a very 90s feel, and despite that series having a 90s feel. Trying to solve the mystery of what's really going on in Westview, Vision lies to Wanda about not being able to join her and the kids trick-or-treating, due to being on duty for Neighborhood Watch. Now, in reality, he actually spends the evening investigating Westview and eventually finds the town's reality warping barrier, which he attempts to cross, not knowing that this will likely end up killing him. As outside of this altered reality, which it's hinted at is numbered as 2800 in the MCU, despite the fact that I think that number's already taken in the comics, Vision is in fact dead. When he moves to leave the town, we watch as he struggles against the magical barrier, which obviously very much wants to keep him within town limits. Sword watches as he attempts to move into their world, seeing him fall to pieces, slowly dissolving in front of them. And as a handcuffed Darcy Lewis shouts for them to do something, like help this man. But that doesn't end up happening. They just run. In the end, it's up to Wanda to save the day when Billy alerts her that he senses that his dad is in danger. Wiccan to the rescue. Number 4, manipulated into being a villain. I really do feel for Vision. Most of the most terrible things that have happened to him in the comics or otherwise are honestly my worst nightmare, which is being controlled by other people. In this case, we're talking about when he was sent in to kill the Avengers and seemingly in some kind of murderous trance. Once the team attempted to reason with him, it became apparent that this synthozoid enemy wasn't all he appeared to be, and in fact that he might not truly be acting of his own volition. In the end, Vision would end up becoming an ally to the Avengers, fighting against his instincts to do them harm. They'd actually help him by deprogramming his murderous urges, and he would eventually go on to join the Avengers outright, fighting many times against his creator and father, Ultron. Many times. Many times. Ultron never stays dead. Number 3, infected with a Hydra virus. During the events of Secret Empire, Steve Rogers would end up having his whole life history rewritten and be revealed as a long-time sleeper agent for Hydra. Our heroes would, however, find out too late about Rogers' true allegiances, and so Captain America would become Captain Hydra, or Hydra Supreme, and would take over the United States of America for the glory of Hydra. But he would also end up recruiting some of Earth's mightiest heroes besides, including Scarlet Witch and Vision. But how did he convince them to join the side of evil? Well, he didn't. For Wanda, Hydra actually awoke Chthon within her in order to take control of her body and make use of her powers. And if you want to learn more about Chthon and that whole thing, you can check out the worst things that happened to Wanda's list, where we talk about that a bit more. For Vision, being a synthozoid, they merely infected him with a virus. That was easy. And although Vision tried to fight it, he remained unable to break free and fight against Hydra until near the end of the event. Like the second last issue, I believe, in the main one. Secret Empire number 9. Number 2, death. While those who only knew Vision from the MCU might think of his tear-jerking demise in Endgame, comic fans know that a fate worse than being destroyed, at least the first time around, awaited him in the comics. Here, instead of Wanda destroying him at his own request, urging her on with words of affirmation and love, Vision ends up being controlled against his will by her, which leads to him ending up in a direct conflict that he doesn't actually want any part of, which ultimately leads to his very gruesome death. Not only does he melt and vomit up silver pods, which transform into Ultron bots, but overkill comes into play when She-Hulk then decides to go into a rage and ends up tearing him down the middle, which is a pretty epic and permanent kind of on-panel death. Although, of course, even if you get ripped down the middle, that's probably not the end of you, because comics. Vision is still a synthetic being, and he can be recreated. So don't worry, he would be rebuilt, and he would return once more. But what a death to come back from. Number 1, weaponized. During the events of Avengers Disassembled, which led right into House of M, Wanda ended up suffering from a mental break, and as such ended up turning on her fellow Avengers. You'd think Vision, being one of the Avengers who, is married to Wanda, would be safe, but no. Wanda ended up not only getting him killed, but it was the way in which she did it, I think, that just really cut him deep. She didn't just put him in the right places to be torn apart by She-Hulk, but she actually turned him into a weapon to be used against his friends and teammates, the Avengers. Vision actually warned them when he came to them that he was no longer in control of his body before vomiting up those pods, which turned into Ultron robot drones, who then attacked the Avengers after their mansion had already been attacked. This was just a real bad day all around for the whole team. When Vision returned to life and Wanda much later came to ask for forgiveness, it would actually be this memory that would prevent him from being able to forgive his wife, Scarlet Witch. He was like, I can forgive the fact that you had a mental break, but you literally turned me against my friends and made me hurt them, and some of them died. It's pretty crazy.
Kicking off the list at number 10. The Phoenix. Baron Zemo's whole thing is following in your father's footsteps. I mean, sure, sometimes it's not hard if your father's not a supervillain, but when Baron Zemo was dealing with the passing of his father, he was an engineer at the time and he was quite smart. Add that in with a little bit of grudge towards Captain America and bam, you get very, very desperate. He became this new persona and called himself Phoenix, but this resulted in him just getting whooped, but this time he got whooped in a cool costume. Luckily, Sam Wilson came into the rescue and Phoenix, fell into a vat of adhesive X and it changed his appearance forever. Sometimes you start out as a different hero, fall into some acid, and then you're like, you know what? I'm gonna wear a mask. I think I'm gonna wear a mask forever. Guys, before we go on to this list of not so great times of Baron Zemo, if you wanna go ahead and give this video a like, that would be great. It really does help us out a lot here in our studio. Thank you so much, you guys are the best. Thanks for supporting. Now let's get right back into this list. Number 9, put on the mask. Okay, so he fell into adhesive X and now he needs a cool mask. Every cool supervillain needs a cool mask, even if you can't understand what they're saying half the time. In episode 3 of Falcon and the Winter Soldier, Zemo finds a purple mask alongside other family goods. It's like a supervillain garage sale. There's a car, there's some outfits, some cool weapons, but what's the story behind this mask? Why did he give it such the long look? Why is he so coy with it? Well, in the comics, Zemo's father, Heinrich Zemo, the OG Baron Zemo, had a mask permanently stuck to his face after he messed around with adhesive X. So after Heinrich passed, he figured he'd continue on with this mask tradition, but thankfully he didn't super glue it to his own face or anything horrible like that, because that would be just, I wouldn't want to see that in the show at all. Not at all. Well, maybe a little bit. No, not at all. While it's fun to see a comic accurate setup for Baron Zemo, I get the feeling his villain roots have only just been planted. Number 8, Masters of Evil. Every supervillain needs a super squad, and this idea was called the Masters of Evil. They came to life in the comics in Avengers issue 273. Zemo was still trying to get that sweet, sweet revenge on Captain America, but he was outmanned. So he's already copying his dad enough, he might as well bring back his dad's idea of a super crew. Let's do it. His own personal team of supervillains, and they weren't too shabby off the bat either. Just 2 issues later, the Masters of Evil took on the Avengers and gave them a run for their money. Number 7, the Sad Dad Reunion. This next one takes place from Captain America issue 357 to issue 362. The distance one will go for family, especially Baron Zemo. It can be pretty overwhelming, especially when he tries to bring his father back to life. Yeah, that happened. With the help of Batroc's brigade, a team of mercenaries led by Batroc the Leaper, Zemo used the Bloodstone to resurrect his father, but the conversation that followed wasn't exactly hopeful. You know how like in Avengers Endgame, where Tony Stark goes back in time and he has that one last conversation with his dad, and it helps him get the strength and courage to actually sacrifice himself by the end of the film? It closes his loop, it closes his character arc. This doesn't happen at all. He brought his father back to find out, well, that his father was actually nothing but disappointed in Baron. This is a fun 6-parter, but man, I can't help but feel bad for Baron. Villain or not, sometimes it's best just to let dead things lay.
Number 6, Death of Captain America. The supposed death, anyways. Steve would later of course return, but yes, at the time, people thought that Steve Rogers was dead. After he was shot through what looked to be the neck, yikes, and then later the gut. And yeah, anyways, he's fine. It's all fine. Bucky himself was initially believed to be the culprit, even by Falcon, and the two had a quick scuffle before Bucky explained he'd rather take his own life first before allowing himself to ever harm Steve. Aww. Bucky also then revealed that he was talking to the Nick Fury on comms and was only in the building that the sniper had sniped from because he was attempting to apprehend the person responsible, which then led to Falcon and Bucky teaming up to do so. Number 5. Used as a pawn in the Civil War. This is more exclusive to the movies, as Bucky didn't play quite as active a role in the first Civil War itself in the comics, but Winter Soldier was a huge part of the reason Iron Man and Captain America came to blows in the MCU's Civil War. Winter Soldier was revealed to be an assassin who was actually Captain America's brainwashed former BFF, James Buchanan Barnes. Gasp! Barnes was framed for the explosive attack on the Vienna International Center during the signing of the Sokovia Accords by Helmut Zemo to create a rift between the supers. Barnes was free and was seeking to learn more of his true past, but Zemo also reactivated his programming to take hold of the Winter Soldier once more so that he could use him to tear apart the Avengers and turn them against one another, especially after he revealed that the Winter Soldier was actually the one responsible for killing Tony's parents. Number 4. Frozen. Like Cap, Bucky Barnes was also frozen, being plunged into frozen waters and later retrieved by a Soviet submarine. Being frozen not only doesn't sound pleasant, because, you know, it's cold and uncomfortable and it hurts, but also it sounds pretty deadly. Bucky was lucky he survived, actually. In fact, the scientists that were to study him weren't even sure that it would be possible to revive him, and after studying him for 2 weeks without finding any traces of the super soldier serum that they had been looking for and hoping to find in his blood, they decided to put him back on ice. Bucky was put into stasis mode for 9 years before he would be revived again so that he could be transformed and weaponized. Number 3. Brainwashed. Bucky was believed dead after he went missing in action. In reality, we later learned that while he had lost his arm in the incident that people believed had killed him, Bucky himself had actually survived. Unfortunately, it was the Soviet Union who had found him and took him in. Keeping his discovery a secret, they brainwashed Barnes, making him loathe the West, turning him into a cyborg, giving him a cybernetic arm in place of the one that he'd lost, and began training him to turn him into their very own weapon and assassin. Number 2. Recaptured. The Winter Soldier, it should be noted, has escaped his captors in the past, but sadly, due to having his brains kinda scrambled, was never able to free himself fully due to the fact that he found himself confused without his handlers and lost. After the assassination of Senator Harry Baxter, the Winter Soldier missed making his extraction point and instead disappeared, going off the grid. Unfortunately for him, without his puppet masters controlling him, he didn't really know where to turn or what to do, and he ended up being recaptured by them shortly thereafter, eventually being located in New York and then taken back in. They decided that his return to America must have triggered something in him, wiped his brain, and were careful to note in his file that missions that would take him to the USA should be avoided in the future. Number 1. Used as a deadly weapon. In the MCU and in the comics, the Winter Soldier is brainwashed and programmed to be an assassin and a weapon, which is probably why he and Black Widow get along so well in the comics and even end up together romantically now and then. They both understand what it's like to be made into a monster, to be manipulated into doing evil deeds that they probably ordinarily wouldn't have done otherwise, but that they still obviously carry a lot of guilt about. The Winter Soldier was used to take out a ton of targets over the years, including Howard Stark and Maria Stark in the MCU, and in the comics, Nomad, Wolverine's love Itsu Akihiro, and President John F. Kennedy, to name a few.
Number 10. A Date with the Devil. In New Mutants Volume 3, Issue 30, we find Mephisto taking a pretty strange deal. I mean, compared to his normal read the fine print soul collecting type of deal, that is. This time around, a team of X-Men accidentally enter the home of Mephisto, the underworld, literally hell. So he offered to let them go about their super business and leave hell on one condition. That condition being that he gets a date night with Amara Aquila. So the team encourages her to say no, but she seals the deal. Mephisto says, "Hey, I'll call you," and then whoosh, they're all gone. Just like that, the team is free. So the team rescued Blink, and then Amara prepared for her date. Issue 37, titled A Date with the Devil, we see Magma double checking that she looks good for her date night coming up. Making sure the curls look good, eyeliner's great, we're looking good, let's do it. And just like prom night, her man arrives at the door with flowers. What a gentleman. So they dine, of course, in the third circle of hell, overlooking a lake of lava with volcanoes going off. It's quite the spectacle. I mean, Niagara Falls, hell, you know, both are pretty romantic. And of course, they had an amazing pit band to set the mood. She returns back to normal life and admits that she had a pretty decent time once he stopped trying so hard. See, usually when a friend goes on a date, you know, it's exciting to see how it went. Now, imagine if your roommate went on a date with the devil. Oh my god. The amount of tea I would make them spill, we'd never sleep. We'd talk all night. I'd also be worried sick. I'd be like, hey, how was your night? He was the devil, so are you good? Is your soul good? Awesome. As far as force deals go, this one wasn't too bad. but there's plenty more on this list. And before we get to number 9, guys, if you could go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, because it really helps out our studio quite a bit. Thank you so much for watching. Now back to this crazy list. Number 9, closing time. If you've worked at a bar, you know it's the worst when people stay right until the very end, right until closing time. Or even worse, they'll show up minutes before you're about to get out of there. Like 3 minutes before last call, someone will walk in, grab a drink, and then they'll just chill and unwind the entire night, which is fine, but sometimes you're like, hey man, I've been here for 10 hours, I gotta go home. Now imagine if one of those late night visits was from Mephisto. See, in Journey into Mystery issue 627, we see another hobby of the devil's besides taking souls that bartenders will tell stories of. What he would do is show up every night to a random bar or a pub, and then he tells a story. He vents, he lets things off his chest. And if you listen and survive, he'll give you a really nice tip. And I'm talking like a really nice tip. You don't have to work anymore in a bar after that point. But if you slip up, things can go pretty south pretty fast. Now this amuses Mephisto. He enjoys playing along and chatting it up with the poor soul who offered to pick up that ship that night. I wonder if I'm gonna see him one night, hopefully. Fingers crossed. Actually, no, let's not see him. Let's not do that. Number 8. What happens in Vegas? Doctor Strange Damnation is a 4-parter that puts Mephisto and Doctor Strange in the most epic game of blackjack. Yeah, you thought Casino Royale had like the high stakes? No devil involved, no way, just Daniel Craig. So following the destruction of Las Vegas after Hydra's short-lived empire, Doctor Strange tried putting the city back to normal using his magic. But in doing so, it resulted in this hotel emerging from the ground, and that hotel just happened to be Hotel Inferno. And of course, inside that hotel is Mephisto. Yeah, it turns out when the city went down, Mephisto claimed all of their souls in hell. So in order to come to an agreement to save the city and the people inhabiting it, a game of brimstone blackjack was in order. I mean, being forced on a date is one thing, but a game of blackjack with the devil? I mean, what a better way to start an adventure. Number 7. Master Pandemonium. Martin Preston made his comic book appearance in West Coast Avengers Volume 2, Issue 4. He was a student at Juilliard and a big-time Hollywood star. I mean, the guy was killing it. He had money, fame, he was in his 50s, but the guy looked like he was early 40s. Just killing it, just killing the game. Then he thought it would be a cool idea to drink and drive. Not a cool idea, never do that. So of course, after the crash, he was approached by Mephisto, and Mephisto had repaired his arm by calling forward a demon. Imagine if Bucky had his arm replaced by a demon. God, it would be a mess. Leaving a 5-point shaped hole in his chest, Mephisto had lied to Martin and said that it's because he had separated his soul into 5 different places among Earth's dimension. That was in fact a lie. In actuality, Mephisto had replaced his other limbs with demons as well. So now he's a walking, talking Trojan horse for the devil. Number 6. Became Captain America. One of the biggest game changers in the MCU was when John Walker came out at the end of the episode, winked at the camera, and then showed us his brand new Captain America suit in the meantime. This happened, of course, in the comics as well, when Steve Rogers had to abandon his identity due to the Red Skull's manipulation of the Commission on Superhuman Activities. So now somebody has to suit up, somebody has to take his spot. The government needed a new figure. So in issue 333 of Captain America, it was titled The Replacement. The government's weighing their options on who should be the next to lead the nation, so they go with the guy who just launched a dude off of a building. Awesome, John Walker just got the promotion of a lifetime. And now we're all screwed. Number 5. Buck upgrade. So now he's got a brand new suit, he's got the best frisbee of all time, but what else does John Walker need? Well, how about some backup for starters? He brings back the bold urban commandos who I mentioned earlier. The Buckies, as they're referred to, wore Captain America masks, boots, pants, but they were topless for some reason. I don't know, maybe they were into wrestling growing up. John's right-hand man, Lamar Hoskins, has been by John's side since the military, so he was obviously asked to be the main sidekick, who we also got to meet in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And he stood tall on the front cover of Captain America issue 334, and now he goes by the name Battlestar. The other 2 guys also got a cool upgrade. Now they're referred to as left and right winger. They were cool until they revealed John's identity to the public, and then they were kind of not cool. Left winger and right winger tried to use John's old Super Patriot tech against him, but they were eventually beaten down and arrested. So now with his identity out and about, it was only time for John to take on another super alias. This time, number 4, becoming US agent. He's back again. One of his more stylish looks, if you ask me, but John Walker returns, this time with a blacked out Captain America suit, and the shield is also less spangly. He comes back and he's put to the test. He's forced to battle an Ironmonger, and when he goes to take it down alone, the shield actually seems to work out pretty well for him. Because in the comics, it was actually Taskmaster who trained him how to use that shield in the first place. And judging by the trailers for Black Widow, because we still have to watch those until it's released, it looks like Taskmaster can throw a frisbee quite well. Number 3. He he joined the Avengers. In West Coast Avengers issue 45, when Hawkeye sets up a team, well, on the West Coast, the government wanted an official in there to make sure all was going well. So funny enough, at this time in the comics, Vision was also trying to get government clearance again, so they sent in US Agent. This led to John rescuing his former partner, Battlestar, from the Power Broker, so now this guy has his buddy back, and he's part of the Avengers. That's a pretty risky spot to put John Walker. I hope we never see him join the Avengers on the big screen, but seeing White Vision in the mix now kind of makes me nervous. Maybe the West Coast Avengers will happen, maybe, just maybe. Number 2, he joined the Force Works. After the West Coast Avengers fell apart, because naturally that's what happens when John Walker is part of the team, the costume and the shield were tossed to the side. So Tony Stark put together an all-new team known as Force Works. Scarlet Witch talked John Walker into joining the team because she honestly believed that John was the backbone to the entire squad. She kind of liked how he would run things. So he planned on running the team on tight military lines and the values of strength and dedication. So John joined the team and he wore a fancy new suit with an upgraded shield. This time it was an energy shield. John remained a member and went against the Kree, the Scatter, and the Mandarin. He was doing an alright job until he reverted back to his old ways. One mission had Force Works team up with the Avengers, and that wasn't a pleasant reunion. John Walker went into conflict with War Machine and Hawkeye, so he had to quit the Force Works as well. God, you can't put this guy anywhere. And last but not least, number 1, he took the serum. In the emotional ending of episode 4 Falcon and the Winter Soldier, we find out what John Walker did to the remaining vial of the Super Soldier serum. He took it. Yeah. Zemo broke most of them except for one. John talked it over with Lamar Hoskins about if he would take the serum if presented the opportunity. So when Walker he does in fact take it, and it's shown to us in a pretty brutal way. While looking for Lamar, Walker reunited with Sam, and then they were all ambushed by the Flag Smashers, Nico and Dovik included. Now, Nico held back Walker for a moment, just long enough that Karli Morgenthau would attack Walker. Now, luckily, Lamar got in the way, and then that's when Karli accidentally delivered a fatal blow to Lamar. And this caused John Walker to lash out, and it's pretty bad. He can't control himself at this point. The serum has made him powerful and even more insane. And when he's attacking Nico in the heat of the moment, he goes a little bit too far. Poor Nico. This was the same episode where he told Karli that he was actually a Captain America fan growing up. So, double. Kicking off the list at number 10. Dell Rusk. Once upon a time, the Red Skull actually weaseled his way into the position of US Secretary of Defense. Except this time, he was using the identity of Dell Rusk. This begins in Avengers Volume 3, Issue 65. So, Dell Rusk decided to develop and test this biological weapon at Mount Rushmore. It's this horrible dust that really does a lot of damage to all the hikers. Everybody just out there enjoying their day. I mean, it's midday, one of the most beautiful places in the world, and Dell Rusk just destroys this entire area. Kids are coughing in cars, people can't see where they're driving. It's honestly madness. Now, this dust was actually a flesh-eating virus that left burns all over your skin. It got so bad that the Avengers had to suit up in hazmat suits. And then in the next issue, in the Red Zone Part 2, Black Panther beat him up so badly that he broke Red Skull's jaw right in half. That's more than fair considering the hysteria you've caused. And before we go on to number 9, if you guys could go ahead and give us a thumbs up on this video, it does magical wonders for our page. It's really helpful. You guys are the best. Thank you so much for supporting. Now back to the list on Red Skull. Number 9, Ultimate Red Skull. Making his debut in the Ultimate Comics, Avengers 1, back in 2009, Ultimate Red Skull is a little different than the Red Skull we know from our main continuity. He's actually the son of Steve Rogers and Gail Richards. They even hid him and trained him to become the next Captain America. It's wild. The Ultimates are insane. So he always feared that he would never live up to his father's expectations. I mean, fair. And then at just age 17, he took out all these doctors and soldiers around him in the military. And now he was in charge. And now his new goal was planning a way out. He then got the haunting look by using a kitchen knife and carving his head, which is just lovely. Here you go. That's a nice image for you all on this lovely day. Number 8, Streets of Poison. This next one goes down during Captain America issue 376 to 378, when Red Skull had initially offered up an alliance with Kingpin. But why? Well, because there was this narcotic that the Red Skull was trying to bring into New York, but Wilson Fisk refused to work with somebody like the Red Skull. So now we got two villains not cooperating with each other, so next comes a full-on drug war. Now, luckily, Kingpin took down Red Skull. I mean, when it comes to hand-to-hand combat, even Spider-Man struggles with Kingpin, so of course he's doomed. Big fists, like Donkey Kong. So he went down, and Kingpin actually spared his life on the condition that he just stays away from his territory. What are you, Walter White? Don't bring that stuff in here. Get out of here. I'm the one who knocks you out. Bam, Kingpin. Number 7, Mother Superior. After the Red Skull's revival, he figured he needed to start a family. Well, rather, he just figured he needed an heir to his evil throne after he retires. So he fathered a daughter on Exile Island to a washerwoman. Sadly, she didn't make it after the birth, but Johann raised this young daughter in this mansion called the Skull House. Clever name, I get it. Skull, Red Skull, nice. But because this is the Red Skull, it wasn't an ordinary life at all. See, through advanced biological means, he made it so she would become an adult in a very short period of time. And of course, if that wasn't already hectic enough, he set her up with some superpowers. That daughter being appropriately named Sin, short for Cynthia Schmidt. But she went on to become Mother Superior, the leader of a group called the Sisters of Sin, where other orphan girls would come along and go through the same process. You've just made a new villain. Way to go. Number 6, he broke up the band. When Thanos finally decided to get out of that big old chair and start hunting down the Infinity Stones, he took out the Avengers group by group. He punched the Hulk so hard in the neck that the Hulk retired. But when you think about why our heroes were so divided in the first place, you have to give Zemo props for making it a hell of a lot easier for the Mad Titan. An empire toppled by its enemies can rise again, but one which crumbles from within, that's dead forever. Waited in a bunker for Steve, Bucky, and Stark to show up in Captain America Civil War, and when they did, the 5 Winter Soldiers each were already taken out by Zemo. Yeah, it turns out he never meant to actually wake the other Winter Soldiers up at all. No, instead it was revealed to Stark that Bucky was actually the cause of his parents' untimely death all those years ago. It was a mission to retrieve other Winter Soldier serums, and because the Winter Soldier was the one to take them, there can't be any survivors or witnesses. Sorry, Tony. This, of course, sent Tony and Steve into one of the most heartbreaking battles in the MCU, and it ended with Tony taking off Bucky's arm and Cap dropping the shield, walking away. The two didn't meet back up until after Thanos had snapped away half of all the life in the universe, all because Zemo and his perfectly timed viewing party. Good work. Number 5, Zola's creations. When he first came out as Baron Zemo way back, he originally had worked with Arnim Zola, and in Captain America issue 275, he worked with these ugly creations, these monsters. It was so gross. Yeah, he teamed up with Primus and kidnapped Steve Rogers' friend from his childhood in order to lure Steve into a trap. And then in the next issue, Cap was fighting off all these monsters, which was just a mess, and then to add insult to injury, literally, Zemo then revealed that he knew Captain America's true identity. Of course, he's standing all cool too with his squad. So villainy, so villainy. Number 4, he framed Bucky. So a quick trip to an ex-Hydra member's house, Zemo now has some information, and his next step was to frame the Winter Soldier, Bucky Barnes, by using the book, the Winter Soldier book. He framed him so that the world would think that Bucky is the one responsible for an explosion that ended the life of King T'Chaka. Now, all this just happened to go down during the time of the signing of the Accords, of course, so Zemo made it look like Bucky did the whole thing, and then Bucky got arrested and held at the Joint Counter-Terrorist Center building, where he was set to be evaluated by a doctor. Now, the doctor never showed up, but who really showed up was Baron Zemo. He posed as a psychiatrist named Theo Broussard, then he pulls out this handy little Hydra book, he raps off some karate kick keywords, and Bucky is back into punchy mode, leaving quite the mess in the building. Number 3, Missile Madness. Near the end of World War II, Bucky and Cap were trying to disarm a bomb on a plane, while an attempt to take down none other than Baron Zemo. Now, Steve fell off the wing of the plane, falling into freezing water, where he remained frozen, awaiting his fate as a super soldier out of time. But Bucky, though, a little different than what we saw in the movie. See, Bucky rode the missile out, and then he was thought to have not survived the explosion, but he did. His body also fell into the freezing waters, and just then a Soviet spy submarine just happened to be in the area crossing between the English Channel, so they scooped him up, fixed him up a brand new shiny arm, brainwashed him into becoming this unstoppable assassin. So thanks to Zemo, we got 2 birds in 1 stone, or 1 missile rather. Number 2, the Thunderbolts. So in the time of comics where Onslaught had destroyed the Avengers and the Fantastic Four, Baron Zemo thought that there needs to be a new team out there. So hey, why not rebrand the Masters of Evil to just look like the good guys? Seems pretty easy. They wanted cities to trust them, and after all, who wouldn't trust a group of superpowered beings in tights? Of course we'll trust you. Why not? I mean, we're seeing this being played out in the MCU. People love new Cap. I mean, they did until he turned insane. Just because you have a chin strap doesn't mean that we trust you. Moral of the story. Now, I really hope that he ends up creating the Thunderbolts in the MCU here as well. He clearly has shown us that he can control a large group of superpowered beings, because he does so without them even knowing most of the time. And finally, number 1, he shot Carly Morgenthau. See, normally when somebody tries to take down a villain, it's a good thing. Like, finally, Flag Smasher, that guy who's breaking all those windows and ruining flag factories, he's done? Sweet, we can finally go back to work, awesome. Usually it's a good thing when a villain gets taken down. But in Falcon and Winter Soldier, Flag Smasher is a little different than the Flag Smasher in the comics. So Carly Morgenthau and Sam Wilson are talking things out. They're seeing eye to eye. They're just people who have been through hell and back, and they're trying to make sense of this ever-changing world. And then US Agent comes in, acts like a dum-dum, and then Carly takes off thinking that the whole thing was just a setup. And as if it couldn't get any worse, Zemo is waiting around the corner, ready to handle it himself after breaking free of New Cap's handcuffs. He shoots her, and then he continues to shoot her. This guy's insane. Like, way to make things worse for Carly. You could have just danced and let everyone else handle this, but you had to be a jerk. Nice. Kicking off the list at number 10, smacked by Thanos. We got to see Captain America and many others get the beatdown of their lives in Avengers Infinity War, but in the comic, in Infinity Gauntlet, it was somehow even more brutal. Yet in part 4 of Jim Starlin's The Infinity Gauntlet, Thanos at one point weakens himself while maintaining the stones because he wanted to take on the Avengers in a more equal fight. All of this just to impress Death. So he makes himself weak and then fistfights them. It's crazy. So Captain America is leading the Avengers into battle, and at this point, everybody is getting hit. Cyclops gets his head stuck in a clear block of force. Vision gets his insides just torn out. And then Thanos sees Cap as having such an emotional outburst, and then after Thanos destroys Cap's shield, he gives him the mighty backhand of a lifetime, knocking him out cold. And before we continue on to number 9, guys, if you could just go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, because it really goes a long way for us here at the studio. You guys are the best. Thank you so much. Now back to the video. Number 9, he lost Bucky. Okay, 2005 was a wild time. We got to see Jason Todd return as the Red Hood, and Marvel had their own type of super sleeper assassin come back from the dead as well, Bucky Barnes. In 2005, Bucky Barnes returned, but of course he was never the same. Near the end of World War II, Bucky and Cap were trying to disarm a bomb on a plane while taking down Baron Zemo. The bomb went off, hurling Steve and Bucky into the freezing waters, and well, as for Cap, he came out of this pretty good. He remained frozen, just hanging out, and Bucky, he didn't end up so lucky. His body fell into the freezing waters, and at the time, a Soviet spy submarine was in the area crossing the English Channel. So they scooped him up, fixed the whole left arm situation, brainwashed him, and turned him into this brutal assassin. It's heartbreaking. See, he has all these incredible abilities that make him a fierce warrior, but he doesn't remember how he got them, making him this deadly assassin and a super crazy villain to handle. This is Steve's right-hand man. Every conflict that they go through is just painful. One of the biggest turning points of Marvel was the introduction of the Winter Soldier. This was a conflict that came to life on the big screen back in 2014 with the Winter Soldier, and we're kind of still seeing Bucky try and figure this life out. With the Falcon and the Winter Soldier coming next month on Disney Plus, we can see even more of what he has to go through post-Winter Soldier times. Number 8, Hail Hydra. This next one resulted in writer Nick Spencer getting death threats. That's right, so fans were mostly not okay with this one. Back in 2016, Captain America said 2 words that would throw every comic book fan for a loop: Hail Hydra. It all went down in 2017 Secret Wars, when Captain America's reality had been rewritten secretly by Kobik, who was a sentient cosmic cube acting under the influence of the Red Skull. So as a child, Steve was recruited and raised to believe in their ideology, which was the strong ruling for the weak, for the good of all. Now there's a pleasant nod to this in Avengers Endgame, of course, when the team goes back in time to the first Avengers plot. We see Steve get in the elevator to try and get the scepter, and then we see the whole Hydra/Shield elevator stocked full of guys. Now we don't know this at the time, but that's fully Hydra. But Steve knows this. So instead of beating everybody up and kicking ass in the elevator like he did in Winter Soldier, he just said, "Hail Hydra." And then just like that, he walked out of the elevator with a smirk on his face. It was beautiful. Number 7, Old Man Cap. At the end of Avengers Endgame, now that we're talking about it, we see Captain America return the Infinity Stones. Only he doesn't shoot back to the present day after he's done. No, he sticks around, hangs out with Peggy, dances the night away, and then we see him as an old man giving the shield down to Sam Wilson just minutes later. It's a lovely end to Chris Evans' run on the character. You got a lot of feels. But in the comics, we also saw an old Captain America, but this time, it wasn't on his terms. The Iron Nail sucked all of Cap's serum out, leaving him not ripped, but also not young as well. So now Steve looked 90, and there's no way you're gonna fight at that age, let alone pick up a shield. So he would lead the Avengers and call out orders from the radio. It sounds like a pretty sweet job for us, but for Steve, he's probably like, man, this is the most boring job I've had in my entire life. Number 6, Johnny Blaze. Marvel Spotlight issue 5, we see a legend being born. The Ghost Rider. See, Johnny Blaze was a stunt performer, and when his stepfather, Crash Simpson, got cancer, Johnny opted to make a deal with Mephisto to save him. And then when Crash tried to return to the stunt life, he crashed. So now Johnny's upset and he has a few choice words for the devil. So Crash still ended up passing away after all, just not from cancer. Kind of not a great deal. So when Mephisto returned to collect his soul, because he thinks that's a fair deal, Roxanne intervened and used the spell of banishment from one of Johnny's books. Before Mephisto got cast away, he grafted the essence of the demon Zarathos to Johnny's body, thus creating the Ghost Rider. Imagine if Roxanne hadn't showed up, he would have just tricked another poor person into trading souls for some lousy deal. Careful what you wish for, folks. Number 5, Silver Surfer. When Mephisto first came into Marvel Comics, many thought it was during the events of Ghost Rider, like I just mentioned. He actually tried taking Norrin Radd's soul before in Silver Surfer issue 3. The Power and the Prize. The story begins with the Silver Surfer being tracked down by Mephisto because he's drawn to his power and nobility. What a perfect soul to take. The guy's great. He sees him as an obstacle, of course, because he's the Silver Surfer and he's amazing. So Mephisto captures Norrin Radd's love to use as bait, but the Silver Surfer beat him down. He's one of the few Marvel heroes that actually had defeated Mephisto. So honestly, if the devil ends up showing up in WandaVision at some point, I wouldn't be surprised if the Silver Surfer is next up shortly after. I think we're gonna go more cosmic, especially with Thor 4. Definitely with Thor 4. Number 4, Cynthia Von Doom. The mother of Victor Von Doom. She was known, of course, to dabble in the dark arts. She often communicated with demons and used spells. She was born in Latveria into a Romani clan, and her people were constantly facing persecution at the hands of the Baron and his men. So she turned to Mephisto to make a deal, promising her soul in exchange to punish them. So he gave her powers to take care of them, but the only thing was, that same power would also take care of the children that were there as well. So he gave her the power, but just not the control. So she couldn't live with herself after what she had done to the children, so she made her husband promise that her son would never follow her footsteps. And then after that, her soul moved to her forever home, which was hell. Number 3, using James Mandarin. Doctor Strange Volume 2, Issue 15, titled Where There's Smoke. We see Mephisto use James Mandarin as a pawn against Doctor Strange. It's brutal. So the issue kicks off with Doctor Strange saving a woman from a fire. And when he returns home, he meets up with Clea. But before they can even catch up, a man named James Mandarin comes to the door. But he has a knife in his hand and he claims to know who and what Doctor Strange truly is. But Doctor Strange plays it cool, of course. James does not play it cool. See, he wants to be Strange's disciple. So he slashes at his own throat to make Doctor Strange use his powers and save him. What a power play. Also, you're so insane, but power play indeed. So Strange heals him up, of course, and he proudly puts it together that no normal doctor could have patched him up that fast. And then out pops the devil to make things just that much more exciting. So now the next issue is Strange saving his love from the afterlife. So while Strange waits for the help of Wong to get him out of there, he has to then face off against all sorts of illusions and deceptions unleashed by the devil to try and change him into one of the Hell Lord's minions. So Wanda Maximoff is playing a role in Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. So I feel like WandaVision will introduce Mephisto, and then in his movie he'll have to go in and finish off the unholy terrors with Wanda's help. Number 2, Fragments of Greater Darkness. So Avengers West Coast Volume 2, Issue 52, we find out the truth behind Scarlet Witch's children, Billy and Tommy. Again, this is another WandaVision theory that I think is happening. Listen up, here we go. So like I said earlier, these 5 pieces of Pandemonium's soul were actually Mephisto's. So Mephisto tricked Pandemonium and then gathered beings possessing the appropriate fragments. 2 of those 5 fragments just happened to be children of Scarlet Witch and Vision. So when Pandemonium arrived, he took the kids, which in turn gave Mephisto full strength, and then this of course left Scarlet Witch having a breakdown. Again, it's been hinted at that Agnes in WandaVision is actually Agatha Harkness, which would make sense. She's a witch. And then in episode 6, we saw everybody in their comic accurate look, and she was of course rocking the witch outfit. Coincidence? I think not. And finally, number 1, One More Day. We finish off with this 4-parter, the One More Day Spider-Man storyline. It began in 2007 in Amazing Spider-Man issue 544, and instead of Pete dealing with the usual thugs or some enhanced science villain with a tail, we see Spider-Man make a deal with the devil. So after Spider-Man revealed his identity in the Civil War storyline, people of course were after him now. So when a bullet strikes Aunt May instead of Peter, he of course feels like he's the one to blame. Absolutely, you took your mask off, that's what happens. Even the opening of the story, it shows Aunt May in a hospital bed with Peter at her side, talking about how she was perfectly fine just a mere days ago. It's very sad. And Mephisto has entered the chat once again. He offers Peter a deal while Aunt May is dying. So basically what happens is that the world will forget about Peter's identity and Aunt May will live. But the whole Mephisto magic is that MJ and Peter never got married. That's just gonna go away. So it's a lose-lose, and you're just trying to be a superhero. So they hug one final time, and MJ explains that their love was always meant to be, and that whatever Mephisto does is unstoppable. And then poof, the deal is sealed. The next day, Peter wakes up, all is fine and normal in his casual life. All that backstory was just wiped out in the turn of a page. Thanks to Mephisto, because your deals are just great. Number 10, his childhood. Superheroes usually don't have an easy childhood. Either they're bullied, they're born with advanced abilities that make them an outcast or a threat, or something traumatic happens with their parents. And in the case of Sam Wilson, he grew up in a tough neighborhood in Harlem, and his father Paul was a minister and tragically met his fate one night after trying to stop a fight between two gangs. Sam was only 9 years old when this happened, and soon after, his mother Darlene was attacked by a mugger and she didn't make it. She passed away protecting her children. Sam, being so young and vulnerable, struggled with his parents passing, and his path hasn't always been that of a hero's path, because before he became the Falcon, he became... Guys, before we continue on to number 9 on our list, we just want to say thank you so much for watching, and if you haven't done so already, if you could go ahead and give this video a thumbs up, because it really does help us out on our channel quite a bit. You guys are the best. Thank you so much. Now back to some more Sam Wilson. Number 9. Snap Wilson. So after the death of his parents, Sam figured the next move would be to dip down into the criminal life. He was angry, he was upset. This was probably what I would have done. So he went by the name of Snap Wilson, and long ago in the comics, there was a Captain America and Falcon issue that said, "Revealed at last the true facts behind the origin of the Falcon." And then it says, "Today Falcon slays Captain America at the command of the Red Skull." What? So this history with Sam being a hustler was retconned so that the Red Skull had in fact used the Cosmic Cube in order to make Sam a criminal turned into Captain. Now, it was apparently part of Red Skull's plan to use Falcon against Steve when the time was right down the road. Now, later on in Captain America issue 276, this retcon was cleared up even more when Sarah refers back to Snap Wilson yet again. She goes on to explain in that issue that it was all over the newspapers back when the Red Skull used Sam against Captain America. So many writers throughout many of these years of comics actually wanted to retcon the whole Snap Wilson phase, appropriately so. Number 8, the other Snap. I mean, turning into dust and vanishing for 5 years, that's probably gotta suck. Now, of course, we have to mention Infinity War on this list. So when Thanos had all of the stones but one, everybody made a last effort to stop the Mad Titan, but it just wasn't enough power. Falcon tried to stop him by shooting his twin guns at him, but Thanos used the Space Stone on him to knock him out of the air onto the ground. Ouch. And then Thanos then gave each and every other Avenger a piece of pain, with Vision of course being last, having his Mind Stone pulled out of his forehead. And after he obtained all of the Infinity Stones, it just got worse. Falcon turned into ashes while he was crawling through the grass of Wakanda, and while he was fading out of existence, Rhodey was seen not too far behind him, calling out Sam's name. So sad. I was so happy when he came back, but like, man, having that be the last that we saw of all these heroes for a whole year, that wasn't easy on my emotions. Number 7, Roscoe Simons. Roscoe was a Captain America fan, as we all are, and he got the opportunity of a lifetime in Captain America issue 181. He proved himself more than capable to carry the shield after Cap had left it, and it was up to Sam Wilson to train Roscoe Simons. So Sam had this mindset. He was hopeful that Roscoe would see the real life dangers of actually wearing this suit. It wasn't just Halloween, you put on a suit, you whip a frisbee, and then you're like, cool, I got him. It was scary, it was hard. It was at a time in the government where it wasn't a good idea to be this type of character. And he was hoping that he would retire. But in issue 182, Sam tells Roscoe that he's gonna look after him. So Falcon did his best to protect the new hero, but in the very next issue, we see front and center the death of a hero. It was pretty brutal as well how Red Skull took him out. It was a very public way in order to warn others who want to step up to that same mantle. Now poor Roscoe, but also poor Sam Wilson. He told this guy he'd watch his back, and now he has his blood on his hands, and also he has his blood on his future suit, which is not ideal. Number 6, Seeing Red. Captain America issue 350. We have a front cover that is sure to draw you in. The supersized 350th issue. So after months of manipulation from the resurrected Red Skull, Steve Rogers confronts and defeats his replacement, John Walker. Now he also has to battle Red Skull. His hands are literally full in this issue, it's great. But at this point, it's a little tough because the Red Skull is now a cloned Steve Rogers, and that includes having the super soldier powers as well, so it's not easy. So due to his dust of death, his red mask shrunk, and now that was his permanent face. So it's the return of Red Skull in a way. So Steve may have returned the mantle of Captain America now that John Walker's out of the picture, but now we have the return of one Red Skull yet again. Number 5, Latveria. Sometimes you're not the only supervillain who's planning on taking over the world. And when you step on some other villains' toes, well, now we got a problem. Kind of similar to how we tried to be shady with Kingpin. Red Skull once took over for Dr. Doom once he was absent as their ruler of Latveria. Now, Red Skull actually tried to make this land a starting point for his end of the world plan, and when Doom got back, he wasn't pleased with how his country has been led. So much so that he actually used a shrink ray on Red Skull. You can see all this go down in issue 12 of Supervillain Team Up. It's quite fun, nice short read too. Number 4, steal Xavier's brain. Yeah, you heard me correctly. Okay, so when the cloned Red Skull wakes up in modern day, he's still got the urge, of course, to take over the world and turn the population towards mutants. He went under and the world was crazy, and then he came back up and he's like, well, I'm gonna still be crazy. And this guy loves experiments. He's super into the idea of becoming Steve Rogers, and he loves moving consciousness around into computers. And it turns out he also has a thing for stealing brains. Gross. And what other brain to steal other than the best one on the planet, the one belonging to Charles Xavier? This all goes down after the events of Avengers vs. X-Men in Uncanny Avengers issue 1. So Red Skull takes Xavier's brain to help him accomplish this task, this evil master plan. So now he's got telepathic abilities, and he uses this to force humans to attack mutants all around the world. Luckily, that part of Xavier's brain was removed, taking away his telepathic powers, because, you know, we don't want any of that. Red Skull's already bad enough. We don't want to give him that kind of brain. Number 3, Genosha. The Red Skull loves turning places into his own, evidently, and Genosha is just another place on that Schmidt list. Now, I talked about how he stole Xavier's brain, but later on in Uncanny Avengers issue 23, he turns Genosha into this camp, this horrible camp where he abducted numerous mutants and Inhumans. Now, the Avengers luckily escaped their captivity and rescued Magneto, and let's just say he wasn't too pleased about this whole event. The Red Skull had made these evil sidekicks that he referred to as the S-Men. Again, great name, makes absolute sense. And after using the mutant growth hormone to enhance his powers, Magneto wiped out these S-Men and then took out the Red Skull. This all seemed fine and dandy at first, but then this led to another, more powerful persona of Johann, the Red Onslaught. Now, luckily, Scarlet Witch and Dr. Doom casted a spell that allowed Professor X to reawaken in his subconscious and took control of the Red Onslaught long enough for our heroes to take him down. But I mean, anything this guy does, no matter where you go, it just ends up in something worse coming out. It's kind of like how villains work. Number 2, Hail Hydra. This next one resulted in writer Nick Spencer literally getting death threats. Fans were mostly not okay with this one at all. So back in 2016, Captain America said 2 words that would throw every comic book fan for a loop: Hail and Hydra. This all happened in Secret Wars, when Captain America's reality had been rewritten secretly by Kobik, a sentient cosmic cube acting under the influence of said Red Skull. So as a child, Steve was recruited and raised to believe in their ideology, which was, you know, the strong ruling the weak, for the good of all. Now, there's a pleasant nod to this in Avengers Endgame, where the team goes back in time to the first Avengers movie, and then we think Steve is about to lay everybody out in this elevator like he did in Winter Soldier, but a couple well-timed words made him skip the workout and simply walk out of the elevator with the scepter. Honestly, it's one of my favorite moments of Endgame. I mean, when he picks the hammer up, cool, but when he says Hail Hydra, it's just like, it's perfect. And number 1, he made Sharon kill Cap. We go back now to the Civil War comic book event where Captain America was killed by Sharon Carter. Yeah, so Crossbones sniped him. Agent 13, who at the time was also Cap's girlfriend, Sharon, she delivered the finishing bullet from a much closer angle. Well, it turns out it wasn't really Sharon who was doing this work. It was the classic brainwashing that made this defeat happen. And it's all kind of thanks to Dr. Faustus as well. See, this causes a whole chain of events. I mean, for starters, Bucky decides he should kill Iron Man, blaming him for the death of Steve Rogers, and then Falcon also goes after his own lead, and then Tony ended up showing Bucky the letter Cap wrote about how he should be the next Captain America, and Bucky agrees to take the spot, but only if he can operate solo. And to think all this came to a climax after Steve's girlfriend was the one to deliver the fatal blow, it's just heartbreaking. And then when you discover that this is all just a big plan orchestrated by the Red Skull, and you know, things start to make sense. You're like, oh, no.
Number 10, Stan Lee's ire. Initially, Vision wasn't loved by all at Marvel's offices. In fact, Marvel legend Stan Lee hated the look and the name of the character apparently when he was first created in 1968 by John Buscema and Roy Thomas. Apparently, Stan complained to Roy about the choice of color for the android, not liking the look of his bright red appearance, and also felt the name was not a good fit, not strong enough for the character. Today, his appearance has become iconic, and we think nothing of it. But back when he was first created, it wasn't just with comic book characters that his existence was considered controversial. Number 9. death of his first creator. Despite the fact that we often attribute Vision's existence to Ultron, he wasn't the only one involved in his creation process. And no, I'm not talking about Tony Stark here. Professor Phineas Horton was forcefully recruited by Ultron into helping him create the synthezoid we later came to know as the Vision. Vision, in fact, was originally given the memories of Professor Horton's previous android creation, which brought on the rage of Ultron, who had specifically told Horton to wipe those memories. He's like, you do it or you're dead. And Horton was like, we'll see. Ultron, of course, did kill the professor, though, creating probably one of the first tragic moments in Vision's life to come about. At the time, the synthezoid mourned the life of his creator and swore to get revenge on Ultron. And before we move on to this next spot, just a quick reminder, if you are enjoying this video and you want more like it, talking about Wanda or Vision or both of them together, oh, romantic moments, be sure to give this video a thumbs up. It really does help us out on the channel. Number 8, no sense of normalcy. Despite the fact that he might seem cold and seems to embrace his synthetic nature, Vision actually constantly strives to fit in. When Wanda and Vision first got married in the comics, they both sought to find normalcy together by settling down in a suburban neighborhood. Oh, it's so nice. Similar to what we've seen the couple attempts in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the Disney Plus show WandaVision. Yeah, if you like WandaVision and you want to sort of read more things that maybe have inspired it, this is a miniseries you're going to want to read. The two of them, however, it seems were never fated to have a normal life, and try as they might, strange events always seemed to disrupt their attempts and lurk around every single corner. For an example of what I'm talking about, you need not look further than the first issue of their miniseries together from the 80s, The Vision and Scarlet Witch. Seriously though, check out this miniseries. On Halloween, a quiet night in quickly turns into something out of a nightmare, ending with a visit from Scarlet Witch's often villainous then-father, Magneto. So it becomes more of a nightmare, I imagine. Number 7, being controlled. The smallest spoilers ahead for WandaVision if you know nothing about it, but mostly this part is pretty safe as we'll just be focusing kind of on the premise of the show and what we know of it so far based on what has been implied in the episodes. So it's more of like a, if you know the show, you probably know this. In WandaVision, it's implied that Scarlet Witch, Wanda herself, is in complete control of everything going on in Westview, including Vision's appearance and existence there. After all, as we talked about before, Vision's appearance there likely means that Wanda manipulated him and brought him back to life, possibly even reanimating his lifeless corpse. Yikes. As the show unfolds, Vision becomes more suspicious of his life in Westview and Wanda and her involvement not just in it, but in manipulating it as well with her reality-altering powers. Also, I never noticed this before, but Westview's name actually seems to be a reference to the initial of the main characters of the show and the show title itself. Westview, WV. WandaVision, WV. Interesting. Also, it's weird that it took me so long to notice that, but I just noticed it today, so I was looking for all kinds of other explanations as to what Westview meant. I never thought about, like, the initials.
Number 6. William Naslund. He was originally introduced in the comics as the Spirit of 76 in Invaders issue 14. William Naslund also held Captain America's mantle for a brief moment. This what-if comic turned out to be canon, so back after the apparent death of Steve Rogers and Bucky Barnes at the end of World War II, the United States approached him to be the new Captain America. The first replacement. Wow, how exciting would that be? So much pressure though. So he had the shield for a brief amount of time. He had done a couple of missions and then he died in action. Yeah, he had to fight off these robots and he ended up in the hands of one of them and was crushed to death. But he went down a hero. He activated a flare device that made the robot inactive, and he also summoned the other members of the All Winners to come to the rescue. So he went out a hero. Short but sweet. Number 5. William Burnside. William Burnside, who had changed his name to Steve Rogers and even got work done on his face to match the look. He ended up developing another Captain America serum, and he and his buddy Jack tried to be the new Bucky and Cap. So they got enhanced abilities and they took down Red Skull. They did some pretty good work as a team. The only thing was, a year later, things started to go a little bit south. They started to become paranoid schizophrenics, so the government put them in cryogenic suspension. He went from being Captain America to being the villain, just like that. So William and his Bucky Barnes sidekick, Jack Monroe, both were in custody of Dr. Faustus, who brainwashed William to become the Grand Director, the leader of the hate group called the National Force. Number 4. 404. Cap not found. In Captain America issue 404, we see Steve Rogers squaring up against werewolves. Yeah, what a sight to see. You heard me correctly. I said werewolves. The story known as Children of the Night runs from issue 403 to 405. And during this time, Captain America is fighting off Starksboro werewolves, and then when Nightshade tries to inject Wolverine with her wolf serum, his healing factor keeps counteracting him. So Druid mesmerized him with serums too. Then the next issue we see front and center, Cap Wolf. Pretty hard to forget. So now he's a werewolf and he has faint memories of Steve Rogers. So, of course, as you would expect, it's a pretty messy good time. Number 3, Civil War. Captain America Civil War was released in 2016, directed by the Russo brothers, and the whole movie, like the comic, is superhero politics. If you're a superhero, you have to register. You can't just be out filming yourself doing super TikToks and then you end up accidentally exploding a school. It's just not gonna fly anymore. And in the movie, it's Wanda Maximoff who kickstarts the Sokovia Accords, forcing Tony to side with the government as he feels responsible for Charles Spencer, among many others' deaths. You know, with all the events that unfolded with the Age of Ultron stuff. So Steve wants to protect Bucky this whole time, and of course, freedom throughout the team is encouraged. Now, eventually, due to Baron Zemo's work, he gets Tony in the same room as Steve, and we see footage of a brainwashed Bucky kill Tony's parents. The next 10 minutes are filled with Steve having to fight off Tony in order to save his best friend. And it's truly heartbreaking, and it all ends with Steve sticking the shield in Tony's chest, and as he carries away a broken down Winter Soldier, Tony says to him the shield does not belong to him, belongs to his father. And that's the last time he sees the shield and Tony Stark, so it all goes downhill for Cap for quite a while after this point. Number 2, Stuck in Dimension Z. In the comic storyline Castaway in Dimension Z, Captain America ends up getting stuck in this land created by Arnim Zola, and he's in there for 12 years. That's some Black Mirror type torture. That's like crazy. So during the 12 years, Steve raised a boy named Ian, who's a kid he rescued from Zola as his own. So the whole thing is that Steve has to return to Earth soon before this implant on his torso that's combined with the virus of Zola's consciousness takes over his mind. Not a great scenario. Also, ouch, that doesn't look too comfortable of a procedure. It's one of the more brutal body injuries, and of course the whole being trapped for 12 years element, I mean, that just adds to this already horrible nightmare. And finally, number 1, Shot by Sharon Carter. We go back now to the Civil War comic book event where Captain America was killed by his girlfriend Sharon Carter. Yeah, so after Crossbones sniped him, Agent 13, who at the time was Cap's girlfriend, delivered the final bullet from a much closer range. Well, it turns out it wasn't Sharon who was doing the work, really. The classic brainwashing made this defeat happen. Dr. Faustus. Okay, this causes a whole chain of events. I mean, for starters, Bucky decides he should then kill Iron Man after this, blaming him for the death of Steve Rogers. And then also Falcon ends up going after his own lead, he just leaves. And now Tony ended up showing Bucky the letter Cap wrote about how he should be the next Captain America. And Bucky agrees to take the spot only if he can operate solo. No government, no big brother watching, just let me do my job, move out of the way, you guys suck. To think all this came to a climax after Steve's girlfriend was the one to deliver that final blow just adds insult to injury.
Number 10, Hank Pym's secret daughter. Nadia Van Dyne is Hank's daughter, who we didn't know existed until 2016. She was introduced in a free comic book day issue about Civil War II. Now, of course, I like Nadia Van Dyne as a character, don't get me wrong, but her being added in retroactively as Hank's lost daughter was something that I felt like was a bit much. When we learned of Nadia's backstory, we learned that she was the daughter of Hank Pym and his first wife, Maria Travoia. Maria was kidnapped during her and Hank's honeymoon and killed. Nadia ended up being raised in Russia, trained in the Red Room. Eventually, she escaped after learning of who her parents really were. By the time she got back to America though to see her father, Nadia learned of his sacrifice to save the world from Ultron and his death as a result. She decided to seek out her stepmother, Janet Van Dyne, and became close enough to her that she felt compelled to change her own last name to Van Dyne, because that's not confusing at all. She's Hank's daughter, she's not at all related to Janet, and yet she has her last name. Number 9. Falcon's X-Gene. Remember that time Falcon was revealed to be a mutant and then we explained that origin away with, a faulty Sentinel? If you don't, let me explain. In issue 174 of Captain America, we see Professor X meeting Falcon and Cap. Charles implied Falcon's connection to his bird seemed telepathic, and that Falcon's telepathic abilities may be mutant in origin. Falcon himself took this suggestion to heart and even considered what it might mean for him to be a mutant, pondering on his strong, seemingly psychic link to his bird Redwing. He then encountered a Sentinel who identified him as a mutant, and so he was a mutant for a time. This was established. And this wouldn't really be revisited or retouched till 2001. Where the idea of Falcon being a mutant was tossed in the trash and explained away as a Sentinel simply malfunctioning. Wah wah wah. Number 8. Black Widow's confusing backstory. Natasha being a mysterious spy from Russia who switched sides means that yes, we are going to get a complex backstory for her, but it actually wasn't always that complex. Natasha was inspired to fight for her nation originally when her husband was assumed dead in combat. Her husband wasn't really dead, of course, and it was implied that this was all part of a plot to basically encourage her to fight for her country. Before that, Natasha was a renowned ballerina. Later on, however, this whole origin was revealed to be a lie when we learned that the Red Room had embedded memories of her being a ballerina in her mind. They made her think she had trained in ballet, but she hadn't really, because I guess that's what the Red Room does. They mess with you and give you fake memories. Her story was also changed from a woman who was inspired by her husband's sacrifice to put her own life on the line for her country as well, to that of a woman being blackmailed and threatened into becoming a spy in order to protect her husband. Number 7. Professor X married Mystique. Some retcons that are really strange come from film inspiration. As a lot of people discussed in the comments, many feel that Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver, for example, would still be mutants today if it wasn't for their being introduced in the MCU's Avengers franchise, which didn't have the rights to include mutants, so we had to kind of unmutant them. I feel as though the case was possibly similar for this weird, secret retcon. In 2013's Uncanny X-Men issue 24, we learned of Mystique and Charles Xavier's secret marriage, meaning that the child we saw Mystique gave birth to while in the guise of Moira McTaggart was likely one willfully conceived, as opposed to Mystique tricking Charles into sleeping with her, which would have been super weird and pretty not good in my opinion. In the X-Men prequel films such as First Class, which came out in 2011, we see a different kind of relationship between Raven and Charles. We get this weird love triangle between Charles, Raven, and Eric, and it seems more of that likely influenced this weird retcon plot point revealed in the comics, in Charles's will. Number 6. Kills off the last humans. During Marvel's The End, Marvel shared with us what various characters would do when faced with the events of and aftermath of the apocalypse. The Punisher was able to track down the last surviving humans, who also happened to be a bunch of jerks who were basically responsible for the events of World War III, which had resulted in this apocalyptic scenario and world that we found ourselves in. They offered the Punisher a choice. He could let them live and they would work to restart the planet and human race using genetic samples, or he could kill them for what they'd done, but then humanity would die with them. Being the Punisher, he decided, of course, to kill them. Though, I gotta say, it definitely sounds like they deserved that, but still, he just condemned humanity for forever. Now we're gonna be extinct. Number 5. Serves Thanos. If you don't know Cosmic Ghost Rider, I highly recommend checking him out. He's an alternate version of Frank Castle that agreed to become a spirit of vengeance and thereby Ghost Rider. As such, he survives basically the death of all of planet Earth when Thanos comes to raise it in his destruction of the universe, and eventually when everyone else who would stand up against Thanos in the cosmos has been defeated, joins Thanos. He does at least try to stand up to Thanos in the beginning, but in the end kind of goes insane and then sees serving Thanos as really his only option, especially if he doesn't want to be alone. Because, it's hard to live forever and be alone forever. It's really sad. CGR helps Thanos to destroy what is left of the universe and remains loyal to the mad Titan Thanos even when an opponent looms who could actually stand a chance at defeating him, known as the Fallen One, formerly the Silver Surfer, who now also wields the power of Mjolnir. Number 4. Raised Thanos. Or at least he attempted to anyways. This heinous act, which doesn't inherently sound too heinous, truth be told, came to us from the alternate reality that Cosmic Ghost Rider belongs to. Later on in CGR's story, he is granted the opportunity to travel to any time and place that he would like via Odin. This twisted version of Frank chooses to travel back to the moment when Thanos was born. CGR attempts to use his penance stare on the young baby, who it doesn't work on because, baby Thanos is still at this point innocent and is yet to become corrupted. Although I gotta be honest, does the penance stare really ever work for Ghost Riders? I feel like I see it fail more times than it works in comics. CGR, instead of killing baby Thanos, decides then to raise baby Thanos himself, hoping to alter the future by teaching Thanos to be good. He later runs into the future version of that baby Thanos, all grown up, and learns that raising Thanos led to an even worse alternate future for Earth, where people are imprisoned by this Punisher Thanos, kept in camps, and killed if they choose to step out of line when it comes to Thanos' plan for enforced peace on Earth. Basically, without meaning to, Frank actually created an alternate reality where living on Earth is kinda like living in hell. Number 3. Executions. While it might not be as bad as condemning Earth to the fate of his adopted son, Punisher Thanos, I personally find this gruesome depiction of the character even worse. This take on the Punisher and his actions comes to us from the 2005 Punisher video game. Here you gotta play as Frank Castle beating up targets to secure key information before executing them. The adults-only rated game was described as having over 100 unique executions for fans to choose from. Wow. The fact that many of these were also super brutal and torturous ways to die only made all of the Punisher's actions here, which you as the player were in control of, even worse. Talk about a glorification of violence. Number 2. Kills the Marvel Universe. In the story Punisher Kills the Marvel Universe, we get a front row seat to watching Frank Castle eliminate literally pretty much every hero, villain, and just about anyone else who gets in his way, as he makes quick work of the entire Marvel verse. As awful as this is, it's also really impressive that Frank, who is admittedly just a human, is able to take out all these superpowered beings so successfully and often efficiently. In the end, after Punisher has eliminated just about everyone there is, one person is left for him to take down, for it to be considered a completely clean sweep: himself. And Frank doesn't even hesitate. Now, what caused all this chaos, by the way? Like in many other Punisher stories, it was the death of his family, which in this reality appeared to have happened while they were caught in the crossfire of a superhuman battle. Number 1. Excuses. One of the worst things about the Punisher is that he tries to make you feel like his actions are justified by using the loss of his family as an excuse. And oftentimes that also works for us readers. Now, I'm not saying that what happened to Frank Castle's family wasn't terrible, because it was. But ultimately, what the Punisher represents is this obsession with violence and the feeling of a never-ending war. Jason Aaron, in his Punisher run, attempted to reveal the veiled truth behind Frank's excuses for continuing this never-ending battle, which honestly Frank himself is likely not even aware of, when he proposed a story with Frank Castle contemplating divorce moments before his family is killed, and also returning home and basically questioning if he actually enjoys life or if he would rather just kill people. Number 10. Jean Grey was resting the whole time. After Jean Grey died as part of the Phoenix Saga, everyone was left flabbergasted. During the story, we'd seen Jean merge with the Phoenix Force, become insanely powerful, lose control over this power, become corrupted and dark, basically become a huge supervillain, and finally sacrifice herself, knowing that if she didn't, it would only end badly. Or worse than badly, because it was already pretty bad. Jean Grey, one of the original X-Men team, was dead. Or so it seemed. Later on, Marvel would want to revive the original X-Men team and bring them together on a new team and comic series called X-Factor. So Jean needed to come back to life. But hey, she was dead. So we got the added story to explain that the version of Jean that had died wasn't really her, but was a separate entity known as Phoenix. Sort of this merged thing. Wasn't really Jean. Jean herself was resting comfortably in a pod beneath the ocean, still lived, and would be able to return. Yay. Number 9. Tony Stark was adopted. Yep, that's the thing that happened. I'm just wondering if this one will show up in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. I can't deny that if we get an Arno as a result, an Arno Stark, I would actually not be too upset with that, even though this retcon's pretty weird. The reason this retcon was such a terrible retcon for Tony was that his parents and their loss always remained a great catalyst and huge emotional plot point for him. Now, of course, just because he was adopted doesn't mean that he can't still love his parents as much as he did and still be as emotionally affected by their death. That's not what I'm saying. But his parents also had a naturally born son that they hid from Tony, who was born before they adopted Tony, and he also didn't know that he was even adopted. Also, there were aliens and alien tech involved in Arno's birth, which explains why this all had to be a secret, but also it's just a lot. All in all, this revelation greatly changed the way Tony saw his parents and made their relationship more complex. And I don't know if either of those things needed to happen. Number 8. Hail Hydra. One of the most shocking moments in Marvel's comic history was when it was revealed that Captain America was actually a sleeper agent for Hydra the whole time. Say what? The guy who for years was diametrically opposed to Hydra and all their beliefs, who had tried and succeeded to foil their plots countless times, was a Hydra agent? How could this be? Well, apparently all those wins were a part of his doing a very good job to convince us all and trust him so that he could stab us in the back back at the right moment and take over America, becoming Hydra Supreme. Fortunately, this evil version of Captain America would later be revealed to have been created by Kobik, a living sentient version of the Cosmic Cube who was manipulated into making this retcon happen. What's more, the true Captain America still existed within the shards of the Cosmic Cube and would return once more to defeat his evil self, fixing the timeline. So, I mean, at least this retcon ended up not staying permanent, but still, it's pretty weird. Number 7. Zorn. Okay, so I was actually going to make the title of this point a little more explanatory, but then I realized how long that would actually make the title of this point. Okay, so Zorn was basically a character who showed up in the comics who was a mutant who always needed to wear a mask. Because of this, we never saw Zorn's face, leading many to wonder who was really under the mask. Although I think most people just thought, well, it's probably a new mutant because, you know, we get new mutants added to the comics every day. But no, of course, this is comics, so it had to be someone. In a dramatic twist, it was Magneto. But no, of course, this is comics, so it had to be someone that we already knew. In a dramatic twist, it was revealed to be Magneto, who had infiltrated Xavier's school in order to rally up mutant support and help him create an army. He then destroyed New York, shot Emma Frost, killed Jean, and was eventually killed by Wolverine. Later on, however, Magneto would turn up again because, well, he's Magneto, and writers wanted to inch him closer to that line between villain and anti-hero again, so they basically retconned Magneto's involvement in all of this. It turns out there was a real Zorn, and it was actually Zorn's brother impersonating Zorn, impersonating Magneto, who was really to blame. Wow. Just wow. Number 6. Thanos. Number 1 dad? Thanos has never really been known as a caring and kind person. Even the people he keeps close to him are never really fully safe from his wrath. Faithful servants, family members, to Thanos, everyone is pretty much disposable. The same could be said for his adopted daughter Gamora, who he hardened and transformed into a killer until she ended up later rebelling. In the 2019 Thanos series, however, we learn how Gamora's relationship with her father was, well, more complex. How he actually, in his own way, was kind of a good father to her. This series also highlights how much they both cared for each other, despite the fact that an Infinity Gauntlet, which happened in the 90s, pre this series, but in terms of continuity would have taken place after this, Thanos seems to not show any regard for his adopted daughter's life. So, it's kind of a retcon. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Number 5. Spider-Man's non-sister. So this is kind of another retcon that for me is similar to Nadia's. I like the idea of this character, but the whole story involving her is, well, it's pretty wacky. Teresa showed up in Amazing Spider-Man Family Business claiming to be Teresa Parker, Peter's sister. She believed she was the daughter of Richard and Mary Parker, Peter's parents, and we got a few cool adventures with her, assuming this belief to be true. She was retconned into existence, but honestly, I thought she was kind of a cool retcon to add in, so I was cool with that. However, things got weirder when we learned that the secret sister we'd never heard of till now was all a lie, and that Teresa actually wasn't who she said she was, despite what she herself had been manipulated to believe. It was all a trick, and Mentalo had manipulated Teresa into believing it herself. It was all part of Kingpin's plan to basically lure Peter to a tomb. And we don't actually even know who Teresa's parents are now. It's still a mystery. They even manipulated how Peter saw Teresa, making her appear more like him, so she'd look more like his sister. It's weird. I wish she was actually his sister. That would have been cooler, I think. Number 4. Spider Destiny. Now you know me, I love the Spider-Verse, I love spider totems, but not all fans share my bizarre obsession with the Spider-Verse and Spider-Geddon stories and the villains known as the Inheritors. I swear I'm like the only person that really loves the Inheritors. If you also love them, let me know in the comments. Show yourselves. With these stories came a pretty huge retcon, which basically implied via learning about the Great Web and the spider totems placed within it that every spider, man, or person had a kind of destiny to become that spider person. In other words, Peter Parker didn't have a freak accident, he was actually destined to become Spider-Man. It was fate! Many fans were not a fan of this change to his origins, as they felt it detracted from what makes Peter Parker so appealing, that he's just an average kid who got a freak spider bite that gave him powers, as opposed to it being all ordained. Number 3. Kang. Sometimes we talk about retcons that are ridiculous because they hurt the overall story. Other times there are retcons that feel like they don't really need to happen, and then there are those that just cause more confusion than really necessary. That's sort of the case with Kang. Kang the Conqueror was a villain who was first introduced in Avengers issue 8 in 1964. He is known for being a time-traveling villain who enjoys sitting and floating around while menacing other people. As time went on, however, we'd come to discover due to the fact that he's a time traveler, the Kang was actually a bunch of other people, including Immortus and even Iron Lad. While these retcons were sometimes interesting, they don't really add much to his story, and at this point Kang being revealed as just about anyone is so old hat, it's kind of lost its shock value as well. Now we're gonna get him in the MCU. I don't know what that's gonna be like. Could be weird, could be great. Number 2. Aunt May's death. Remember when Aunt May died, but it wasn't really Aunt May but an actress who had actually died while impersonating Aunt May? Yeah, that was a weird villainous plot. What we saw in the comics as an elderly Aunt May's death was later retconned into being one of the weirdest and most elaborate plots of Green Goblin's criminal career. It was later revealed that the woman who was dead and buried and who we thought had been Aunt May was actually an elderly actress who happened to be on her deathbed and who had agreed to take on one last role in order to torment Spider-Man? Prove how great of an actress she was? Her motives are pretty foggy. Maybe Green Goblin agreed to pay any surviving relatives of hers a ton of cash? I honestly don't know. What had really happened was this actress had been genetically altered to exactly match Aunt May's genes, meaning no one at the hospital suspected this imposter to be a fake. She died after revealing to Peter that she knew he was Spider-Man and was even buried in Aunt May's intended plot next to Uncle Ben for a time. That is, of course, until we all learned that Aunt May was really still alive and this had been some kind of bizarre ruse. Number 1. Clone Saga. I won't deny that in my time on this channel I've come to actually somewhat love elements of the Clone Saga. I originally disliked Clone Saga when I started working here, but I very much have come to appreciate parts of the story and to acknowledge that without Clone Saga, we wouldn't have some very awesome characters like Ben Reilly and Kane Parker. However, one thing I still cannot get over is how long Marvel spent tricking everyone with this story. People spent 20 years thereabouts thinking they were reading Spider-Man as in Peter Parker, only to find out that all those stories were not his but actually belonged to a clone. Granted, at least it was a pretty cool clone who we'd all come to love after, but at the time this was a pretty shocking and frustrating revelation after years of stories, and it left a lot of fans feeling betrayed at the time. Number 10 made the Thing a villain. Way back when in his classic villain days where many of Dr. Doom's plots were overly elaborate and therefore somewhat ridiculous, he created a time paradox when he forced the Fantastic Four to go back in time to retrieve Blackbeard's treasure. In so doing, he and the Fantastic Four team in essence created the dread Blackbeard, which it turned out was actually none other than Ben Grimm. In other words, Pirate Blackbeard would have never existed if not for Dr. Doom and the FF, so one, he not only created the legend of a rather cruel and vicious pirate, but he also made one of Marvel's biggest softies take on that role. Poor Ben. Number 9. Doombots. Dr. Doom has committed enough atrocious acts just as himself, it's true. But then you also factor in all the deeds his Doombots have done as well. There have actually been many instances that we've thought Doom himself was responsible for various villainous acts, only to find out that we were fooled by Dr. Doom and that this was actually a Doombot disguised as him. There have also been many instances where we've thought Doom had died as well, only to find out that it was just a Doombot who had perished. Still, although passionate fans will be quick to point out instances in the comics where that Doom was actually a Doombot posing as the real deal, the truth remains that as the creator of Doombots, Dr. Doom is still technically responsible for all of their villainous and in some rare cases, good acts. Very rare that they're good. Number 8. Mind-controlled dragon tattoos. In the Ultimate Universe of Earth 1610, Victor Von Doom's alternate counterpart, Victor Van Dame, ended up using dragon tattoos to mind-control those who joined his micronation known as the Free Zone in Denmark. In reality, those who joined the rent-free shanty town were not actually as free as they thought. In exchange for free living, those who joined Van Dame's Free Zone were asked to get dragon tattoos. Now, these tattoos allowed Van Dame to control the citizens as the microfibers in the tattoo interfaced with the wearer's brain. Number 7. Tortured the Fantastic Four family, including their son Franklin. And this is when he was just a little kid, by the way. Poor little Franklin. Of course, Franklin Richards is a super powerful mutant in the world of the comics, but when faced with a horde of demons, it became frighteningly clear both how horrified he was and how innocent and vulnerable Franklin still was as a child. This experience left Franklin traumatized even after the Fantastic Four family managed to escape their fate. Dr. Doom sent Franklin to hell while torturing every other member of the Fantastic Four. He forced the Thing to fight endless losing battles, set fire to Sue Richards, trapped Reed in a room filled with magic from which he could not escape, and gave the Human Torch Mr. Fantastic's powers, and then proceeded to use those stretching powers to tie him into a knotted monstrosity. Number 6. Ugly equals evil. That's what Thanos' retcon taught us. Yep. Thanos' backstory was added in detail in the series Thanos Rising, and what many fans were surprised to learn was that his mother was apparently driven mad by her newborn baby's hideous appearance, and because of his appearance, claimed that she needed to kill him. That's pretty terrible. She sensed basically that because he was ugly, he would also be supremely evil. And the really shocking part of this was, of course, that she was right. But also, what the heck? Just because you don't like the look of your baby doesn't mean it should deserve to die. Fortunately, a retcon was later added to fix this when it was changed to it not being the baby's appearance but to a specific deviant gene in the child's genetic code that concerned both of his parents instead. Still, not great, just analyzing your baby's genes and being like, we already know you're gonna be evil. But it's better than it just being about the ugliness in appearance as the pure reason for condemnation, I guess. Number 5. Doom is never wrong. Some people like Dr. Doom a little too much. I'm probably guilty as being one of those people. To the point that they can't let him be flawed. Doom must be perfect. Well, while Doom may believe that, the reality is it's his flaws that actually help to make him such a great character, and also are important because they are a part of the reason for his villainous nature. Originally, his vendetta started against the Fantastic Four, and more specifically Reed Richards, years ago, when Reed tried to give him pointers on a device he was building. Reed warned Doom that it was unstable, but Doom didn't listen. The device ended up exploding because, well, Richards had been right, scarring Doom's face. Unable to blame himself due to his huge ego, Doom decided to blame Reed, and thus a villain was born. However, retcons have come into play a few times in regards to his origins as to whose fault the device exploding really was. In one retcon, it's actually implied that it's Mephisto's fault, but if that's true, then why has Doom hated Reed so much for pretty much forever? Another retcon implied that Ben Grimm possibly intentionally sabotaged Doom's machine, which is an even worse retcon because it makes Grimm, normally a very lovable character, look like a jerk. Both of these retcons help to buff out Doom's flaws at the expense of making his feuds illogical. Number 4. Peter and MJ's marriage never happened. During the story One More Day, Peter made a pact with Mephisto to ensure that his Aunt May would live. Part of this deal was also that people would forget Peter's secret identity, which was currently out in the open. Although it wasn't like a bargain part of the deal, it was just a thing that would happen. But what did Mephisto want in return for this? Peter to never be a hero again? Did he want his soul? No. No, 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 no. He wanted his marriage? Mephisto wanted to take Peter's marriage to MJ. And by that, I don't mean that he wanted himself to marry MJ, which would actually make, in a weird turn of events, more sense. I mean, he wanted to make it so that their marriage never existed. This was such a strange request that many were left speechless when Peter agreed, and this actually happened. What was likely really going on is that Marvel no longer wanted Peter to be married. Or Joe Quesada never wanted Peter to get married in the first place. They wanted to return to the days when Peter was flying free and single, so this story happened to erase it. Number 3. Norman Osborn and Gwen Stacy's relationship. This little frightening retcon was added during the Sins Past story. It also made Peter look like an insensitive jerk, just for good measure as well. The story here that was added in was that Gwen Stacy had an affair with Norman Osborn, a man who was much older than her at the time and who would go on to be responsible for her death. This affair resulted in Gwen becoming pregnant with twins, which she secretly gave birth to. Norman then raised these children, lying to them that they were actually the children of Spider-Man and Gwen, and that Spider-Man had killed their mother, turning them into misguided villains. This was not a retcon anyone needed, but hey, it was one that we got. Number 2. Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver were never mutants. If you have been subscribers to our channel for a while, then you likely saw this one coming from a mile away. A list of the worst retcons with Amanda hosting it? I wonder what she's gonna rank high up on that list. And you were right. One of the worst retcons in mutant history for me will always be this. During the events of Axis, it was revealed that Wanda Maximoff and her brother Pyotr, Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver respectively, were never the children of Magneto, and, as such, never mutants. Instead, we learned that the High Evolutionary abducted them when they were young, experimented on them, and then disguised them as mutants and returned them back to the world. Why? Well, we don't really know, which is part of the reason this is such a terrible retcon. That, and it erased years of meaningful family drama and history, and created a bunch of plot points that no longer really made any sense. Number 1. Snap Wilson. Even worse than my own personal nerd rage towards the retcon of the Maximoff twins, everyone's outrage, my own included, against this retcon. I still can't believe this was a thing that even happened in the comics. Oh my goodness. Sam Wilson in the comics became a good friend of Captain America and was even known as his ally, the superhero Falcon. However, it was revealed that Sam Wilson wasn't actually Sam Wilson, a social worker from New York with falconry skills. This was all a fabrication of the Red Skull, who had used the cosmic cube to turn him into the perfect partner for Captain America as part of an insidious plot. The true persona of Wilson was the criminal, thug, and pimp known as Snap Wilson. What? This would be revealed to Cap as being his true persona, which Cap would then save him from. Yikes. Fortunately, years later we would see a retcon that would basically undo this one, turning the fake persona of Sam Wilson into the real persona for him, and the originally retconned real persona of Snap Wilson into the fake, meaning that Sam Wilson was always Sam Wilson and Snap Wilson was the version created and used by Red Skull. Whew, thank goodness.
Starting off at number 10, he destroyed Johannesburg. With many comic book stories to pick from, these events can get a little confusing. To start off the list, we go back now to the events of Avengers Age of Ultron, released back in 2015. Now, before Wanda Maximoff was an Avenger, she was getting some dirty work done to help Ultron. Okay, this included playing mind games with the Avengers. So Wanda gets to Banner and he hulks out big time. This time it's very uncontrollable. Now at this point in the MCU, the Hulk has a handle on his Hulk mode, kind of, like he's got it down. After Avengers 1, he was like, I'm always angry, and then he's like standing in the circle with them. He knows what he's doing to some degree, and with the help of Black Widow, she can tippity tap his palm and make him chill out. Black Widow was out of commission this time due to the same mind trick from Wanda, so he ends up going crazy in Johannesburg, and it takes Iron Man and his new Veronica #Hulkbuster armor to come in and knock some sense into him, literally. Now, of course, Wanda was in his head, but none of the other Avengers reacted this way. They just went to places in their mind that brought them a lot of distraught, and they couldn't even fight anymore. They were leveled. So, the Hulk made matters worse, of course, resorting to punching and being, well, a monster. Number 9. He broke Las Vegas. The Hulk was assisting S.H.I.E.L.D. on a mission to clear out some Hydra weapons in the Vegas desert, and after a gamma bomb blew up in his face, he becomes this dark, menacing gray Hulk and begins to terrorize Vegas. The Fantastic Four's Thing comes to help, telling Johnny Storm that monsters understand monsters. Pretty valid point. So Ben goes up to Banner and lays it down. He explains that he knows he doesn't want to hurt anybody else and that he's just messed up, that's all. He continues to offer to help Banner, treatment for the radiation gamma even. And then Hulk responds with, she's dead. Betty Banner is dead and you can't do anything about it. You killed her. And then, bah, he goes crazy. So the people in Vegas see this monster battle happening on the news and they love it? Yeah, they start placing bets. Some guy's like, $50 on the Hulk. Another guy's like, $50,000 on the Hulk. It's wild. Check out Fantastic Four issue 533 for yourself to see how the Green Giant got through that. Number 8. He left the Avengers. Okay, again, we go back to Age of Ultron. So after the final battle on Sokovia, the Hulk decides to just leave. He hops in the Quinjet after tossing Ultron out and decides to just let it keep flying. He ended up going pretty far considering we don't see him at all during the Civil War storyline. It's not until Thor Ragnarok that we meet Banner again, and he has no idea where he is or how long he's been there. Without the help of Black Widow, he can't transform back into his regular, nice Banner body. I have to include this because this is a decision the Hulk made, not Banner. There's a difference. He himself decided that he was just gonna go. Maybe he was done with hurting people. It's actually a massive character arc that people didn't really look into enough. Like everybody came out of the theater like, whoa, Vision and Wanda, can't believe it. Scepter was actually a No way, dude. Hey guys, where's the Hulk? Where did he go? That's the Hulk. Of course he came to the aid in Thor Ragnarok, but maybe if he hadn't gone at all, he wouldn't have fought Thanos when he did, huh? Therefore not losing and becoming unable to get mean and green come Infinity War, when you really needed a Hulk. He could have figured it out on Earth. I mean, he figures out the perfect balance by Endgame, so I feel like if he just stuck around, he would have gotten to that point faster. Also, don't leave the Avengers, man. You need the science bros, always. Number 7. Madison Square Up Garden. This next one is pretty wild. So Thor Ragnarok was loosely based off of the Planet Hulk storyline. I say loosely because that story didn't end up going so well. Like the comic book story didn't end well. So on Sakaar, the rocket that he arrived in ended up blowing to smithereens, causing some casualties that left Hulk a little distraught. So what did he do? He heads back to Earth, pissed, and thus begins the World War Hulk storyline. He just murks everybody, all the heroes that Earth has come to love, just in the path of this very angry beast. It's not a good situation. He locks the Illuminati in Madison Square Garden and then makes them fight to the death. I mean, once you spend enough time on Sakaar, I guess it becomes second nature to just battle it out. In the first issue of this series, you see Iron Man in his Hulkbuster armor, and he uses repulsors to accelerate his punch, which is something Iron Man can be seen doing in the MCU. I like when they keep small details like that make these series memorable and awesome, especially the artwork. It looks really cool, and then they insert those into the MCU version of that story. See, even Hulk's design on Sakaar, they really wanted to treat the audience with the same elements that we loved already from the comic book. So make sure if you haven't already to grab all 5 issues of the 2007 World War Hulk storyline, because it's actually a treat and you can plow through it in like a...
Number 6. His relationship with Scarlet Witch. This was just a weird and convoluted story in general, but basically Dr. Doom managed to wipe Wanda Maximoff's memories, and then she fell in love with him and they were to be married. She didn't know who she was until Wiccan showed up and reminded her of her origin story and her family. Eventually Wanda put 2 and 2 together and figured out that Doom was manipulating her due to the fact that he seemed so concerned with her actually believing Wiccan's story. What's up with that, Doom? Doom also claimed to be doing everything out of concern for protecting the world from Scarlet Witch's unpredictable and unstoppable reality warping powers, and for his real and true love of Wanda. He really loved her, so he claimed. However, he later revealed himself to be a man obsessed with only power when Wanda transferred her reality warping power of the life force to him, and he went all crazy. He also claimed to be responsible for the death of the Avengers and mass extinction of the mutants. He was like, that wasn't Wanda, that was me. Wait, what? Number 5. Sacrificed his first love for sweet, sweet armor. Dr. Doom's inspiration for the name he gave his goddaughter Sue and Reed Richards' little baby girl Valeria came from his first love, a love that later returned to his life and who he learned was the only woman he had ever really loved. So he claimed. When she did return, however, it was revealed that Dr. Doom had ulterior motives for his oldest and truest love. He didn't want to be with her, not in a traditional sense anyways. He wanted to sacrifice her life and her soul in order to earn himself some powerful mystical armor. Readers watched as Valeria's skin burned away and her flesh was remade into Doom's shiny new armor. Number 4. Battle World. Following the incursions, Dr. Doom was turned into God Emperor Doom when worlds collided and were destroyed, prompting Doom to use newly acquired reality warping powers and sort of reality mending powers to create his own universe. This universe would become known as Doom's Battle World, a patched together combination of the broken Marvel realities. Doom himself became a god to all the heroes and citizens who lived there. He had his own army of Thors at his disposal, making Doctor Strange his deputy and turning Sue Storm into his consort. When Reed Richards finally managed to return and find Doom, he made Doom confess that Richards would have actually built a better world, and after fighting, Doom relinquished the power he'd used to Reed, who set out to actually remake the Marvelverse and most of its alternate realities once more, with only a few tweaks for improvements here and there. Number 3. Joie de Seigneur. While some may praise Dr. Doom for being a great ruler who brought prosperity to Latveria, we also need to acknowledge that he also snatches many of his people's rights and freedoms away in being their governing monarch and ruler. This was showcased when Dr. Doom exercised his right of droit de seigneur, marching into one of his faithful peasant Klaus's home on his wedding night, and insisting that he be allowed to sleep with his bride Gretchen. While Klaus seems awkwardly accommodating, Gretchen appears downright shocked, upset, and possibly pissed off, and rightfully so. Also, yeah, Dr. Doom's Latveria still has a peasant class, so it isn't always depicted as being that great, because if it was, why do you have peasants? What's up with that? Number 2. Dictatorship dependency. This is what Dr. Doom has created for Latveria, the nation he rules. While Latveria is considered a peaceful place with virtually no crime, nor problems of poverty or hunger harming its citizens, who do genuinely seem to worship and love their ruler, Victor Von Doom, it's also a place that has become so dependent on his leadership that anytime he leaves, it basically breaks. Meaning that if there ever comes a time when Doom must leave permanently or finally dies for good, Latveria's economy will collapse and the nation will quickly devolve into chaos and ruin. We've seen what has happened to Latveria before in the comics when Doom has ceased being its ruler, and it's truly never good for the nation. Number 1. Got bored of ruling the world. Remember that time Victor Von Doom took control of the Purple Man, aka Zebediah Killgrave, by trapping him in a psychoprism and used his focused powers by putting them in a gem, which he used to control the world? Now, you might think that sounds like the worst part of the story, Doom ruling the world, but in a strange twist, it actually wasn't. Using mind control, of course, is not really a heroic act, but in doing so, Dr. Doom was able to create peace on Earth. All wars ceased, no one went hungry, the global economy prospered under his rule. However, with no one to challenge him, Doom became bored. So he abandoned ruling the world just as the heroes rushed in to stop him, freeing the world, but in doing so also returning it to a state of disorder and chaos, which may have been the real crime in this story. Just Doom being like, I don't want to rule anymore, and we're all like, but wait, you were actually good at it. You had to use mind control, but still.
Kicking off the list at number 10, making weapons. Now, of course, we see Tony Stark as the genius billionaire playboy philanthropist, but how exactly did Tony end up with all that cash money? Well, in the MCU, it is shown that Tony is running his father's company, of course being Stark Industries. Founded in 1940 by, of course, Howard Stark, the company is the best at what it does, that being selling innovative weapons to the United States Armed Forces. Ooh, now after being kidnapped by the Ten Rings and seen the damage that his weapons cause in an up-close and very personal way, he of course seized all manufacturing of the weapons division. But the damage is done. It is later revealed in Avengers Age of Ultron that one of his Stark Industries manufactured missiles killed Wanda and Pietro Maximoff's parents. Not cool, Stark. Not cool. Number 9. Hulk's field trip. In the MCU, the Hulk leaves the Avengers and the planet for that matter. See, after tossing Ultron out of the Quinjet, the Hulk lets himself fly away on autopilot, perhaps feeling that he's done too much damage and that his presence is causing more chaos than comfort. Well, in the comics, that basically happens, but it's done with haste. And it's done by none other than our very own Iron Man. So the Incredible Hulk issue 92, titled Planet Hulk, starts off with Reed Richards and Tony Stark talking to a monitor, and that monitor is sending footage to the Hulk in the ship. They explain to the Hulk their trick, which was to send the Hulk away while he was already in space for a previous mission with Fury. They say they've picked his destination very carefully, which is this lush planet full of vegetation and game, no intelligent life forms. Sounds pretty easy breezy for a creature like that, only of course he ends up on Sakaar, which is not that planet. It's very different. He's actually forced to become a gladiator and fight for his life. Now, the Hulk is out of the picture, right? Mission accomplished, we did it. Pew, gone. Get that guy out of here. Wrong. Sakaar ends up being destroyed, and the Hulk, well, he's got some names to scratch off his get even list. So he heads back to Earth to find the Illuminati and seek revenge, including on Tony Stark. Number 8. He faked his own death. Iron Man issue 284 has quite an interesting cover. It shows Tony Stark wearing a suit, but like a boring kind of suit, in a casket. Ooh. And the text at the bottom of the page reads, "The death of Anthony Stark." It shows all these superheroes mourning the loss of their friend and fellow Avenger. Even Dr. Doom is like, ah yes, let us drink to the memory of a worthy opponent. Like, you know you're sick if Dr. Doom is like, yeah, cheers, I'll drink to you, that's cool. And to make things even crazier, he writes a note to Rhodey that says, "This keycard will give you full access to the entire complex. Take this CD-ROM disc to my office and play it on the AV system." Wow, nothing says futurist rich billionaire like, take this CD. It'll help you. Okay, you have to like wipe it off first. put it in. So he puts it in and clicks play, and it is pretty awesome. It shows Stark explaining that somebody has to carry on for him. The world needs an Iron Man. And bam, you see a suit made just for Rhodey. What a moment. Tony continues to say that Iron Man was the greatest thing that he's ever invented, and he doesn't want it to die with him. Fair. I mean, it's pretty overwhelming for him though. I mean, all that responsibility of being the new Iron Man, plus mourning your best friend, plus figuring out how to run a company, that's a lot of. So finally, he suits up and it's epic. Iron Man lives again, but it turns out Tony wasn't actually dead at all, rather just under cryogenic stasis until a scientist sorted out his spinal software problems. Ha! Got he! And number 7, he created Ultron. Ultron can't see the difference between saving the world and destroying it. Where do you think he gets that? That line is said by Wanda Maximoff in Avengers Age of Ultron. So Tony has created some amazing stuff. All of his suits, his innovative tech. Barf? Barf? That's the greatest thing. This dude knows what he's doing. But what if he created a supervillain? Ooh. So we find Tony and Bruce working on Ultron, right? Or just the idea at this point, rather. See, Tony had this idea since Avengers 1 that if he could create a suit of armor around the world, it would be a safer place, or rather create a robot that kicks ass, essentially. Something that just takes care of threats while the Avengers, I don't know, read a book, relax for once in their lives. Of course, one of the main elements helping them achieve this goal is the return of Loki's scepter. They think by studying the central power unit of the scepter, which ended up being the Mind Stone, one of the 6 Infinity Stones, they can finally solve this puzzle and be safe. Tony ends up accidentally infusing the consciousness from the Mind Stone into this evil, jealous killer bot that mirrors many aspects of Tony Stark. So Ultron immediately starts to learn about what he is and who the Avengers are, and with his brain being the super AI, he decides they've all just gotta go. And by the end of the movie, we have a horribly damaged Sokovia with roughly 177 deaths. One of those deaths being Charles Spencer, a young American engineer killed in the final fight. Charles's mother ends up confronting Stark in Captain America's Civil War, which ultimately leads to, drumroll, number 6, Old Man Logan. Now, we were all delighted to see an R-rated Wolverine story finally on the big screen with the release of Logan back in 2017. This was loosely based on the story Old Man Logan, written by Mark Millar and Steve McNiven. The film had Logan in the spotlight alongside Charles Xavier and Caliban, and is one of my favorite movies ever. Not even superhero movies, like just as a movie in general. Hugh Jackman is chef's kiss, so good. But in the comics, the story has moments that are even darker than what we saw, believe it or not. Like how about a Hulk gang, for starters? That's right, so in this storyline we find the Hulk as one of the few remaining superheroes on Earth. Now at this point, Banner had decided to breed with somebody like him. Maybe just a little bit too much like him. Like, I don't know, say, his cousin? Yeah, his cousin. So him and Jennifer Walters had an offspring and referred to them all as Hulk Gang, which is a sick nickname for your little ones. Now, if you think that's already twisted and wild, the Hulk Gang actually killed Logan's family. Why? Well, they were bored, of course. What else do you do when you're bored? Do you watch these videos, or do you just murder Wolverine's family? Today you did the right choice. So Wolverine went to exchange a few words with the man, of course, and Hulk ended up swallowing Wolverine whole. What a jerk. Don't worry though, Wolverine used his claws to get out in a rather messy way, killing Papa Banner in the process. Number 5, Statue of Liability. We go now to the Incredible Hulk issue 299. So after the Avengers and everybody decided, hey, the Hulk can finally control himself, let's all be nice, let's give him a statue, reward the man. He earned it. Earth's mightiest hero, we love this guy. Yeah, he's on lunchboxes, so nice. Then in comes the villain Nightmare to ruin the day for the rest of us. So he taps into Banner's subconscious and makes him resort back to the monstrous, uncontrollable ways that he used to be. Again, kind of like when Wanda was messing with his brain in Age of Ultron. So he grabs the statue that was made for him and then just hucks it at Thor. That's hilarious. Like, hey, happy birthday, thanks. Duh. The Hulk even beats up Banner's girlfriend named Kate Waynesboro, not to be confused with the Wayans brothers. So next time you give your friend with anger problems a statue, just make sure they can't throw it at you. And number 4, train problems. Have you ever been commuting to work and you think, oh, what's taking so damn long? Why isn't this train going anywhere? Well, in a world where these beasts exist in real life, the usual traffic jam would have most civilians' palms sweating. Like if the Avengers were real today, like in our world, I'd be afraid all the time. So many villains, so many problems all the time. Like if I heard a balloon pop in the other room, I'd be like, is it Loki? Are we good? Am I dust? What's going on? Is it happening again, please? So in the Incredible Hulk 122, Hulk has a moment where he kind of ruins an entire locomotive, yeah. He was annoyed by the sound of a passing train and does his version of a rope workout, you know, when those like guys get in the thing and they flick it? He does that, but with a train track. Causes all the cars to fly in the air, like that tablecloth trick, except when your like nephew does it and he doesn't know how to do it yet, so they all just fly off. No passengers were on the train, sure, but I mean, making it rain sidecars, I'm sure that's not the easiest thing to clean up. Number 3, Joe Not Fix-It. The Grey Hulk, aka Joe Fix-It, is one of my favorite versions of the Hulk. He's like this bouncer in Vegas, and he reminds me of a security guard that I actually used to work with in a bar. His name's Tony. He was awesome. He was like this big, old guy. He's amazing. So naturally, I like this Hulk a lot. The next point made me like him even more. He's a savage. A savage! So he sees his ex-girlfriend, Marlo Chandler, being attacked by a werewolf. So what does this giant, unstoppable monster do upon seeing this? He just stares and considers letting her get mauled. I mean, maybe he's jealous, maybe he's a little bit, I don't know. But I mean, Joe Fix-It is this tough, I don't give a shit kind of guy. I mean, come on, this is a pretty dark character arc. A little bit too much, Mr. Joe Fix-It. And number 2, Killed Tigra. Okay, yeah, this one goes pretty dark. We go now to the 1995 comic titled The Last Avengers Story. Now at this point, most of our loved heroes have gotten old and retired. Either that or they've died in battle. Not much is happening in terms of super support. So in the first issue, we find the Hulk in, of course, a fit of rage. Classic. And at one point, he gets his green mitts on Tigra and oh baby, that's a position you don't want to be involved in. Tigra jumps in like, yeah, we're a team, haha, the Hulk, I can just claw his eyes out as easily as anybody else. And then Banner grabs her and says, hey, make a wish, and pulls her apart. Like one of those holiday finger popper snapper things where you go, yikes, make a wish. Who says that? This guy's messed. And finally, number 1, Hungry Hulk. To end this list, I thought it was fair to pick the 2002 to 2004 run of The Ultimates, where Hulk is, of course, a cannibal. Mark Miller and Brian Hitch wrote this thing so well that I actually want to see this version on screen more than like any of the latter. So after becoming the Grey Hulk, he ended up eating a bunch of people. He even encounters Iron Man and says the line, little man smells like canned meat. Hulk wanted to know if he tastes like canned meat too. Like, if he said that to me, I would my super suit. I would be like, no, I'm not dealing with this guy, you guys do it. Like imagine if he said this in the movies, the entire theater would just sit up like, is he about to eat Tony Stank? So since the Grey Hulk incident, he's been locked up, rightfully so, but after Magneto attacks the Ultimates base, they lose power for a little. So during that time, Hulk decides the 6 nursing staff members near him served as a tasty treat, and down the hatch they went. Yum yum.
Number 10, rendered Eros powerless. It's got to be hard being the brother to Thanos. Just ask Eros, aka Star Fox, about it and I'm sure he'll tell you as much. Star Fox is often presented as being a hero in the comics, and yet despite his own reputation trying to do good at least, he has to live in Thanos' shadow. Of course, Eros has done some questionable things in the past as well, but I still can't help but feel a little bad for him. During the 1991 Infinity Gauntlet miniseries, while Thanos threatens Marvel's greatest heroes, Star Fox is taken prisoner by his brother, who basically rendered him powerless and makes him watch as he torments his fellow superhero colleagues and friends, eventually killing many of them. Though of course, they would return. That is what it's like to be the brother to the Mad Titan though. He takes the phrase of sibling rivalry to a whole new level. Number 9, kills his own servants. Thanos is not even above killing those who serve him. He has obviously without much remorse killed his own adopted daughter Gamora before in the comics, and in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, although it pained him, he also chose to sacrifice Gamora to get his way and complete his plan. The Black Order, however, are not usually people who betray Thanos, unlike his traitorous daughter. They are usually loyal to a fault, having been tested over the years by Thanos and chosen for their strength, ingenuity, and ruthlessness. However, sometimes their own greed for power gets the best of them. Such was the case when Corvus Glaive ruled the Black Quadrant in Thanos' stead and was made to end his own life upon Thanos' return for basically doing so. He was like, I was just keeping the seat warm, and Thanos was like, nah, I don't believe you, you're dead. Before there was the Black Order, by the way, there was the Butcher Squadron as well, a team which Thanos assembled but would actually choose to murder members of at random for his own reasons. Not really a guy you want to serve, I don't think. Number 8, killed his father. Mentor is known in the comics as Thanos' father. Alars, aka Mentor, has felt deep and intense guilt for years over his son's actions. At times, Mentor has even tried to intervene to try and fix the disaster and bloodshed that Thanos has wrought. In the end, Thanos grew sick and was dying from an unknown and seemingly uncurable disease. He turned to his brilliant father, an accomplished scientist, for a cure, after exhausting every other option he could think of. Mentor was forced to help Thanos when he threatened the other scientists' lives and the lives of their families who resided on the moon where Alars was living. When pressed, however, Mentor shared that a cure would take years to find, if there even was one, and that he was happy Thanos was finally dying. He only regretted not killing his son himself years ago. This outburst resulted in Thanos having an outburst of his own, and he murdered his father in response. It's not a great relationship. Number 7. Killed his mother. He just likes to kill everyone in his family pretty much. Granted, his mother did try to kill him when he was born, so this feels almost somewhat poetic. In the series Thanos Rising, we saw more into Thanos' origins and backstory as a youngster. Here we see him become more and more obsessed with death, specifically Lady Death, starting out with a weak stomach but growing to enjoy murdering animals, other children his age, and eventually killing his own mother, searching for something that would help him find who he was. Oddly enough, he thought killing his mother Suisan would make him somehow feel like or become less of a monster? As she had threatened him with a scalpel when he was just a baby, driven mad by his appearance, he also attacked her with one, tying her up and gagging her before cutting her open. Also, what's with that sexy position that she's in when all of that's happening? That's weird.
Number 6. Signing the Accords. Captain America Civil War was one of the most highly anticipated MCU movies, and it's pretty easy to figure out why. The two teams going against each other, I mean even the poster, I was sold. The movie touches base on incidents like Charles Spencer. How many people have died because of the Avengers? I mean sure, the whole fun is seeing somebody like Stark create this powerful villain and then use his own wit to defeat him with the help of the Avengers, but like an asteroid basically hit Earth. I'm surprised more people didn't die in Sokovia, to be honest. So the government sees this and makes every superhero sign these accords, and Tony Stark is all on board. He wants this to happen. He's pushing it. That way the government can control what they do or where they go, so it's not their name that's on the line. And if you don't sign, you retire. That's the deal. Now, of course, some team members don't agree, like, Captain America, who's all about freedom. Tony basically forced team members to sign up and go against his very own coworker, Steve Rogers. It's wild because we see both these character arcs changed in this movie for the both of them. We see Cap at the start, who wants to be this team player and do everything by the books, in Captain America, the first Avenger. And now, by his third movie, he's an outlaw because Tony Stark didn't listen to him about Bucky. Now Stark, when we first met him, he was cocky, he was rich, he wanted to punch his way through all the problems, even spying on S.H.I.E.L.D. the second he entered the helicarrier. But now, Tony wants everybody to sign and work for the government, all because he feels bad about creating Ultron and blowing it out of the sky. If he had never signed and listened to Cap, the crazy plan of Zemos wouldn't have actually worked. The band would still be together, and when Thanos came to Earth, they all would have smoked him before he even got hands of all the Infinity Stones. Ha! Rant over. Number 5. Hashtag engaged. Spider-Man Homecoming was released in 2017 and directed by John Watts. And it's amazing. I mean, this version of Spider-Man, this film version, this is Spider-Man. The older Tom Holland gets, the more and more this dude is going to become Spider-Man. He's going to basically do what Robert Downey did with Iron Man. It just works. This is it. We found the casting for this character. Done. Good luck to anybody else who wants to replace these guys. So one thing I hated about Spider-Man Homecoming was the very end of the movie. So Tony has this plan to introduce the world to Spider-Man, the newest Avenger, even showing him this fancy new Iron Spider suit as part of the pitch. Peter Parker, being all coy and smart, thinks that it's just a test and politely declines the offer. He says he would rather be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man just to chill out, So Tony reacts in a great way. He's all for it. He's like, yep, protect the little guys, I gotcha. And then after Peter walks away, we see Pepper Potts emerge from behind him, and in the background you can see all of these reporters and spectators. He really was planning on introducing a new Avenger. Also, after the events of Civil War, really? I always thought that was a weird time to be like, hey, remember on the news when this was a big deal? Well, here to introduce a high schooler with the ability to throw a bus, here's Spider-Man. He even comes with 4 metal arms and instant kill mode. Check it out. Not a great plan, no. So instead of introducing the new Avenger, he has to do something. I mean, those poor reporters, how are they ever gonna get over it? So he grabs an engagement ring and last second he proposes to Pepper Potts. Ah, damn. That's not a bad trick to have up your sleeve. Like, ah, damn, I forgot my school project. Maybe I'll just propose to somebody in class instead. That'll distract them. Number 4, address showdown. If there's somebody that wants to kill you, odds are you're just gonna stay away from that person, right? Like, you don't just give your address out to the public, let alone, I don't know, a terrorist. So after Happy gets put in the hospital due to one of the Mandarin's attacks on the Chinese theater, Tony Stark decides he's got a few choice words for the man responsible, the Mandarin. Iron Man 3 of course didn't go so well with fans, given that the villain was just a fake out, and a fake out that people were actually really looking forward to seeing. I mean, the Mandarin's one of the coolest villains ever, and instead we got not the Mandarin. We got like a guy who turns red. But in his message to the Mandarin after visiting Happy in the hospital, Tony says how he's not afraid of the Mandarin, and he in fact should just die. Pal. Do you ever argue with somebody and then you take it like a step too far and you're like, oh, I shouldn't have said that? So Tony gives his address to everybody filming. There's a news crew, there are people on their phones. Like, dude, I get you're upset, but come on, use your smart billionaire head. So of course he gets attacked by the Mandarin because he's the Mandarin, and that's what villains do. They attack your Malibu mansions. What did you expect? And out of all of the suits Tony has access to, I'm talking his suit in the final battle for Avengers, he has the briefcase suit, the suitcase suit where he's like, you know, out of all these things, no, this guy gears up with a prototype suit. And of course he gets wrecked. That attack sets up the entire film. Could have easily been avoided if you just didn't give your address out on the news. Silly man. And number 3, Superior Iron Man. So we go now to issue 1 of Superior Iron Man. The issue itself starts off mirroring the tech in Iron Man 3 in a way. Tony can control his suit and fight inside of it, but he's not actually in the suit. He's actually laying in a pool, sipping on margaritas. So his new Extremis armor was fascinating. So much so that Tony released it as like the smartphone app. Now this app allowed people to change their bodies using this virus, becoming however they wanted. And it was great, but then Tony does the ultimate power move and says that the app was actually just a free trial, and in order to continue using it, you have to pay 100 smackaroos a day. Honestly, that's not a bad deal. I would pay that to become Iron Man, definitely. I'd be broke. You know what I would do? I would actually pay for the app, and then use the suit to rob banks, and then use that money to pay for the app. I'm a villain. I guess I just realized I'm definitely a villain. Just said it out loud, there we go. Number 2, Bad Armor. In the Age of X limited series released back in 2011, we find Tony Stark in a rather odd predicament. See, at this point in the series, issue 2 I believe this happens, Tony is infected with this virus that is bonding him to his suit. You ever get like a piece of your sweater stuck to an arm hair and you're like, oh god, what's going on? And then you pull it and you're like, whew, that was close. It's kind of like that, except, you know, way worse. He's even going by the name Steel Corpse, which, I mean, as far as names go, it's pretty good. It's pretty fitting. Now, at this point, he was a mutant killer. It's a long story, but basically when Iron Man went to stop killing these mutants, in like the turning point of the comic, his suit, which was now literally part of him, started to control him against his will. And it's super scary how it looks on the page. Like, he looks so different and sick and gruesome. His body's not doing well at all handling the merge. So his armor starts to take aim at a group of mutants against his will, and he freaks out, begging Captain America to save them in a rather dark way, if you know what I'm saying. So Cap then takes out Iron Man with a shot to the head. Nice move. A little late, I would have done it sooner in this series, but definitely a good call. And finally for number 1, Demon in a Bottle. So the classic storyline that was actually the center of attention for Iron Man 2 back in 2010. So in this movie we find Tony Stark, and at this point the arc reactor in his chest was powered with a palladium core. So time plus usage of the Iron Man suit equals poison. Not great. So we see Tony's life being ran down to the ground. We see his mental health start to decline, and at Tony's party he's hammered, he's peeing in his suit, and then to see a drunk superhero like Tony Stark acting like that, it wasn't random. This idea didn't come out of nowhere. The idea was loosely based on the Demon in a Bottle storyline from the comics. See, this character arc begins with Iron Man issue 120. We see Tony just slamming drinks. The opening shot, we see like 3 mini bottles of gin, and then Tony orders more. And the flight attendant's like, hey, how about a magazine, because it's the middle of the day? And Tony responds with, nope, I'll do another martini. She even tries to cut him off. She tries to cut off Tony Stark. You know how fat that tip would have been? She says, sir, you've had like 3 already, are you sure? And he's like, yes ma'am, I am. Stating that he's drinking for 2, the other of course being his Iron Man persona. That's a lovely sign right there. What happens when you have a superhero who loves slamming martinis? Well, you get Tony flying through the air drunk, spreading toxic fumes all over a crowd. The drunk tank himself even cheated on his girlfriend Bethany. Not cool. The alcohol addiction was of course put to the side for the MCU storyline, thank God. Like imagine if Tony tried to snap his fingers but he was too drunk. He's like, I'm so hungry. Can we go home please? Like I gotta eat junior chickens right now.
Number 10. Lost his nose. After Wolverine lost his adamantium from Magneto ripping it out of him, which was also a pretty terrible thing he suffered through, he also lost his nose along with it. It seemed that without the adamantium, Wolverine then reverted to an animalistic state, which has been on and off characterized as some part of his mutation, or alternatively, he gets it from his biological father. During the time he was without his adamantium as such, he also started to appear more animal-like, and as a result somehow lost his nose for some time in all the chaos of art that followed. Though thankfully Logan would eventually get his nose and his adamantium returned him once again. Number 9. Possessed by the Black Blade. The Black Blade was forged by a man named Muramasa himself, a legendary sword master who built the blade using a part of his soul. Known for being a madman, the fragment of his soul would live on and possess whosoever wielded it, making them also mad and in essence bloodthirsty. We saw this happen to Jessica Drew in the 1989 Wolverine series, and then saw Wolverine manage to save Jessica when he himself took the blade from her. He thought this would kill her, but instead the soul of Muramasa within the Black Blade merged with Wolverine's, seeing him as a kind of kindred spirit of sorts. Wolverine then found himself possessed, and during this time almost killed Jessica Drew and the Silver Samurai as a result. Fortunately, he managed to assert his own will and reject the Black Blade's influence in the end, but being possessed is of course never fun. Although I don't think he would have been too beat up if he had ended up killing the Silver Samurai while possessed. Number 8. His wolf family getting murdered. Wolverine has more origins than I have fingers. One such origin tale for him allows us to see him living with wolves, retreating to the wilderness after suffering a great trauma. The pack he lives with has become his family, and he takes great pride in taking care of his family and their newest cubs. However, Wolverine's curiosity one day gets the better of him when he and his pack run into the White Bear, a mysterious and uncommon sight for them. Wolverine senses the bear is out of place and tries to help it by leaving it gifts of food. Unfortunately, he seems to be unable to help it, until the bear one day manages to follow the scent of Wolverine's pack, tracking them down and slaughtering them. Wolverine returns home to find his family killed and devoured by the bear. With a mix of emotion, Logan himself strikes out and kills the bear, falling himself but recovering after a short while. Poor Wolverine can't even have a wolf family in the comics without some tragedy coming along and ruining it. Number 7. Forgot who he was. The amount of times that Wolverine has had his memories blocked, altered, and experienced amnesia is numerous. If you go back to some of his early years in the comic, he even seems to be somewhat lost in terms of really knowing who he is or why he is the way he is. In Claremont's Wolverine run from 1989, Wolverine even seems to have very little idea of what his early life was like. At this point, he even seems to believe that his claws are completely made of adamantium, and that they were even implanted inside him and are not actually part of his mutant powers, but he doesn't seem to recall who implanted these claws or why. Later on, we learned that Weapon X was responsible for the adamantium that was fused and coating his skeleton, and that his claws underneath were actually made of bone. We'd also learned that these bone claws were part of his mutation, and not created in some lab like he'd originally believed. Due to the amount of times his brain has been tampered with and his unique healing factor, Wolverine on a regular basis seems to forget various things about his past. His mind is constantly foggy when it comes to what he has done and even sometimes who he is. Number 6. Child Killer. You wouldn't think that Thanos would make a great father, and he doesn't really. But that hasn't stopped him from siring many children throughout the galaxy and adopting others at times. Gamora is his adoptive daughter, but he also has a naturally born son named Thane. In fact, Thanos even attempted to find his son at one point during Infinity. He didn't want to find him to reconnect though, or repair a lost or severed connection. He wanted to find his son in order to kill him. Not knowing where to look, he decided the best course of action was to kill as many children within Thane's possible age group as possible. Thanos disguised this plot as one of conquest, ordering planets to pledge fealty to him and offer a tribute of the heads of their youths between the ages of 16 to 22. Number 5. Influences Thane. This doesn't sound so bad as a title for a point, until you realize just what that influence did. Thane was Thanos' son, whose mother had been an Inhuman. Before Thanos showed up, Thane was a healer and didn't know that he was Thanos' son. Thanos, in his hunt to eliminate the child, demanded the heads of Attilans and therefore the Inhumans' children. This ended with a fight where Thanos fought Black Bolt, and Black Bolt detonated a Terrigen bomb. The bomb was so massive it triggered Terrigenesis in all those who had an Inhuman lineage on the planet Earth's surface, including, you guessed it, Thane. Thane's power was death, and he instantly went from trying to save people to basically killing everyone around him in an instant. Pardon my snapping. Completely unaware of what was happening. He later learned of his legacy, and Thanos promised he would kill him. However, Ebony Maw betrayed his master and instead set Thane free and influenced him to accept his destiny and fight his father. Thane did this and won, trapping Thanos. Learning of his heritage and with the influence of the evil Ebony Maw, who was only there due to the fact that he was originally a member of Thanos' Black Order and was originally loyal to him, Thane became a deadly and dangerous villain over time, with power initially rivaling his father's. Number 4. Mass extermination policy. We all know Thanos as someone who is heartless, ruthless, and who kills to get closer to his one true love, Lady Death. And yet there is another reason he sometimes is known as a mass exterminator when it comes to various species and alien worlds. In the 2019 Thanos series, we see him going up against one of his greatest foes, Magus, and we see how he attempts to prevent Magus from expanding his universal Church of Truth, a much more evil religion than it sounds, let me tell you, by killing everyone, in order to prevent Magus from ever being able to convert them. You can't convert people if they're dead. While really joining Magus' church also is not an ideal scenario anyways, killing them to prevent this is intense and cruel. In truth, Thanos has always enjoyed killing, so to him it's likely like hitting 3 birds with 1 stone. He not only gets to rob Magus of converts, but also gets to revel in death, and also gets closer to Lady Death through killing. Yay! Number 3. Brought peace to the world. If you don't know Cosmic Ghost Rider, here's the abbreviated version of his backstory. He's basically a superpowered Frank Castle from an alternate world where Thanos killed everyone. He is the power cosmic and is also a spirit of vengeance and a Ghost Rider, likely the last one. He's also been around so long and alone for so long that he's pretty mentally unstable. He was one of the last to stand against Thanos, but eventually ended up joining him because there wasn't really anyone else left to fight alongside, and he realized he couldn't beat Thanos at the end of the day. Cosmic Ghost Rider first appeared in 2016's Thanos series and would get a few miniseries of his own thereafter. His self-titled series shows him stealing baby Thanos so that he might raise him to be better, thereby preventing all the death and destruction we've come to know Thanos for. But even with Cosmic Ghost Rider's insane but well-meaning influence, we learn Thanos cannot be fixed. At first, CGR thinks he succeeded, but he later learns when he runs into Thanos from the future that his Punisher Thanos of a son has somehow grown up to be an even worse tyrant than without his influence, proving that even when people try to raise Thanos right and try to prevent him from becoming some crazy tyrant, it will still always end badly. Thanos forcefully brought peace to the world, and when others resisted his rule, he killed those who opposed him and created internment camps to keep the rebels in. Number 2. Sacrifices millions for the love of a lady. In the comics, Thanos merely wielded the Infinity Gauntlet and snapped those out of existence to simply get closer to Lady Death, who he was wooing. That's right, in the comics the snap was simply an attempt to impress his eternal crush. Killing billions just for a chance at love with someone? A chance? That's pretty terrible if you ask me. Number 1. Killed Death. If this feels like a paradox, well, it kind of is. But we need to remember, in the Marvel Universe, for Thanos anyways, death is not just a concept, but is also a person, Lady Death, his love. In an alternate universe, however, Death and Thanos have a different relationship, less of an unrequited love story, as Death is posing as Thanos' mother, until Thanos realizes that Death actually has been lying to him and takes revenge on her by killing her. This doesn't sound so terrible until you realize the ramification of this action, as Thanos does in the story. Basically, killing Death messes with the whole balance of the universe and everything, which, as we've seen in other alternate worlds like the Cancerverse, can be very, very bad. Of course, this doesn't go as terribly as the Cancerverse, as this happens in Earth X, an alternate world known as Earth 9997, and we at least don't have the influence of the many angled ones in this alternate world to worry about. Number 10. Rune's Xmas. Likely for a lifetime for one unfortunate child, Punisher is disguised as Santa and posing as a man looking to raise funds for charity. When he asks the passing Napolitano family to help the poor, they refuse. He reveals himself and then guns them down, right in front of a child. Horrified, the child asks why, and Frank answers they were naughty. Wow. Well, that kid will fortunately never misbehave again, but it will probably also take years of therapy to undo the damage that the Punisher also just did to his mental health. He's gonna be terrified of Santa for forever. Number 9. Murders litterbugs. Although this story was later retconned somewhat in an effort to explain away the Punisher's intense and erratic behavior here, when it was first released, this behavior was considered canon. Punisher had recently returned to the streets, condemning them and their inhabitants as being worse than ever. He was out to punish those who caused any harm to others or society in general, which meant zero tolerance for litterbugs. At one point, we watch as he guns down a couple in the rain who discard a soggy newspaper onto the ground they've been using as a makeshift umbrella. Aren't newspapers compostable, Frank? I mean, I guess they take a long time to decompose, so it's still not amazing for the environment, but still. Professing in his internal monologue that littering is a crime, the Punisher fires at the couple and we see at least one of them topple over in the corner of a panel. Their fate isn't confirmed, but it's definitely heavily implied here that he just killed them for littering. Number 8. Torture research. Garth Ennis's Punisher story, The Slavers, is widely recognized for being one of the darkest ones out there. While the Punisher seems justified in taking on some of the worst and most horrible people that he's ever gone up against, and you definitely root for him, he also goes to great lengths to deal out his own form of justice here. At one point we see Castle going through medical textbooks just so he can increase his knowledge for enhanced torturing purposes. There are countless violent moments in the story that both feel justified and also make you wince as you see just how far the Punisher is willing to go to punish these people. It should also be noted that this is a mission of vengeance that Frank is actually undertaking not even for himself, but for someone who escaped these villains, a woman named Viroka, and for her baby whom her captors had killed. Number 7. Torturing Barracuda. So Barracuda is admittedly a villain in the comics, but still the way Punisher disposes of villains can sometimes just be so graphic and awful that it leaves you sympathizing with them. That was the kind of fate Barracuda was resigned to, a villain introduced during Garth Ennis's time writing The Punisher and the 2004 Punisher series, which was part of the Max label at Marvel. This Punisher, by the way, is also resigned to another alternate world as well, and honestly a lot of his actions were pretty horrific. So yeah, this is not Earth 616, my friends. This is Max, adult comic stuff. When it came to Barracuda, Castle punished him by connecting some sensitive parts to a car battery and shocking the heck out of him. Later on, he would try to kill Barracuda in an explosion, but only severely burn him. Then he would chop off both his arms and bury a pickaxe in his chest before shooting his head to bits with an AK-47. It's pretty awful, I gotta say. Number 6. Entire family was murdered in the Old Man Logan story. Logan actually manages to settle down and start a family with a woman named Maureen in the apocalypse. Together they have 2 children, Jade and Scotty, likely named after Logan's old friend and sometimes rival, Cyclops aka Scott Summers. Unfortunately, when Logan is forced to go on a mission to earn rent sooner and in a higher sum than expected by the Hulk gang, he returns on time, in fact earlier than that, only to find that the Hulk gang got bored and murdered his entire family anyways. His 2 kids and Maureen are all dead. Logan gets his revenge, of course. Tragically though, it does nothing to bring back that which he has lost. Number 5. Forced to kill Jean Grey. Multiple times too. Of course, Wolverine usually only kills Jeannie to spare her pain, but he also has a tendency to stab her and others that he cares for right through the gut. So not sure how much pain he's really sparing her there. In fact, I feel like, as someone who wields a sword, if you really want to hurt them, you usually stab them through the gut. Just saying. Wolverine has been asked to kill Jean multiple times. One time he was asked to kill her an innumerable amount of times all in one go, when she believed her deaths would weaken the Phoenix Force, and so asked Logan to kill her on repeat for goodness knows how long. Of course, as we've seen in the newest Wolverine series, when once again Logan kills Jean, this time not on purpose, it hurts Wolverine to have to do this. He doesn't like to hurt the ones he loves, yet he often feels as though this is a cycle that will never end, which is also why he tends to keep to himself more often than not, because he doesn't want to risk hurting those who get close to him. Aww. Number 4. Sent to Hell. The Red Right Hand and Mystique were the ones responsible for this plot. Mystique lured Wolverine into a ritualistic circle where his soul was then sent to hell. Wolverine's soul was not only tormented, but his body actually became the host for a demon, being known as Helverine on Earth, an entity who sought to destroy everyone Logan had ever cared about. In Hell, Logan had to face the ghosts of his past. Mariko, who was herself in Hell, was even ordered and forced into torturing Logan. She ended up in Hell due to the fact that she was the head of the criminal Yoshida family. Yikes. Number 3. Forced to kill Daken. While Daken has definitely earned his father's ire, the truth is Wolverine has never wanted to kill his son. Not really. Despite the fact that Daken has attempted to kill and has effectively tortured Wolverine for years in the comics, Wolverine struggled to accept the fact that he had to end Daken's life when the time came. Later on, it was revealed that although it had been Wolverine's choice to kill Daken, drowning him in a puddle, which actually ended up being a much more emotional moment in the comics than it sounds, it had actually all been part of Sabretooth's plot to torment his nemesis, Wolverine. Sabretooth had manipulated Daken knowing that Wolverine would be forced to kill him. Number 2. Murdering his kids. If you think killing Daken was bad, keep in mind that it wasn't as bad as this next point. Wolverine was manipulated into facing and killing his own children by his own son Daken himself. Daken had been working with the Red Right Hand, an organization focused on destroying Wolverine's life due to their common hatred of the hero. Daken, working in collaboration, brought a team known as the Mongrels together, which was comprised of Wolverine's as yet unknown children. They would remain unknown too, as Wolverine was forced to kill them when the Mongrels attacked him and refused to stand down. It was only after they were all dead that it was revealed to him that the team was entirely made up of his own flesh and blood. His own kids! Shocked and traumatized at this discovery, Logan knew he could never make amends but took it upon himself to at least give them a decent burial. Number 1. Manipulated into murdering all of the X-Men. In the alternate future belonging to the Old Man Logan universe of Earth 807128, Wolverine has seen and experienced some of the worst things ever. This alternate version of Logan no longer goes by the name Wolverine in that future. That's because he was the one responsible for murdering the entire X-Men team, and all the students residing at the X-Mansion. But it wasn't his fault. Wolverine at the time was manipulated into doing so by Mysterio, who created an illusion that made Wolverine see everyone in the mansion as a villain and an intruder. The illusion faded away only after Logan had killed everyone, with it being revealed that his last opponent, whom he thought was Bullseye, had really been one of his closest allies, Mutant Jubilee. Sad.